Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the meeting of the Select Board for February 13, 2024. We're meeting remotely because we were under the impression that there was going to be a huge snowstorm today. For better or worse, it didn't turn out. Better for those of us who don't want to slog through the snow to get around, and worse for kids who wanted to do that. So here we are on a remote meeting. So let's start out with announcements and updates from the Select Board. And let me just start by saying on the agenda is a discussion of our remote participation policy. Public comment is for items not on the agenda. So I will allow 15 minutes for comments on remote participation when that comes up on the agenda with a 3-minute time limit. We'll also have 15 minutes for a discussion of the meeting recording policy. Please sign up with Devin in the chat in order to be on the list of speakers if you haven't already done so. So any other comments from the Select Board? Mike, that's your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick one. I have had an email from a constituent asking or calling to my attention a device called FlipLock, which is fitted to school classroom doors. And I promised him that I would bring that to the attention of the school committee and mention it at this meeting. So I've done that, and I'll bring that to the attention of the school committee as I promised. That's it.
What's it called? FlipLock?
FlipLock, yeah.
What's it do?
There's a device that looks fairly simple on the door. If there's a problem, an emergency, and the door needs to be locked, then you just walk up to it and you just turn this little lever and a siren goes off, alerts people in general across the school that that there's a problem. It's obviously meant for a shooter situation.
Thank you.
Okay. I think Miriam was next.
Yeah, mine is quick. I'm just alerting the public that I'll be gone for the next few weeks and reminding you all that I will be gone for the next 2 weeks. So you will not see me at the Select Board meeting. And for the members of the public, when we are out of the country, we cannot receive emails from our brooklinemass.gov account. So I will not even be able to receive your emails. So just keep that in mind. If there's some urgent reason you need to get a hold of me, you can do through the Select Board office. Thank you.
Okay, John, I see your hand up next.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to say a word on behalf of an organization which I happen to think is a terrific organization and a real kind of a gift to Brookline, a gift that keeps on giving. And the organization is known as Hidden Brookline. And I don't think at this point they themselves are too hidden. They've been doing a lot of really good work with a lot of visibility for several years now. It all started, as I recall it, and maybe they can correct me on the history of this, but it all started with an observation that was made by some folks having to do with a very noticeable plaque that is traditional, that is present in Town Hall and has names of some of the so-called founding fathers. That's not a term we use these days, but of Brookline. Also has the names, rather, mysterious to some observers, perhaps, just names without last names, first names, but not with last names. and with strange sorts of added words such as his and then a name. Well, those were the names of slaves, and the fact that those names were there, as Barbara Brown of Hidden Brookline likes to say, hiding in plain sight without much comment from anyone, without much thought given to what this signified for Brookline, that there were the names of slaves right next to the names of some of the quote unquote founding fathers of the town. Well, one thing led to another, and the organization Hidden Brookline has continued to research the implications of that year in and year out, has contributed many educational experiences and educational programs to the town of Brookline. And on our agenda tonight, as if they haven't done enough, is an item that involves a $600 grant that they are giving to our Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations to do some further education. So all credit to Hidden Brookline for making Brookline much better informed about a crucial element of Brookline's past, and doing it in a way that has been bracing, sometimes difficult to accept, but in the end, for the better of all of us, that we confront these realities and learn from them. So thank you, Hidden Brookline.
Thank you. And I believe we will have a reading of the names of those enslaved individuals later on in the meeting by Danelle O'Neill. Is that correct, Devin?
Yes.
Okay. Paul.
Hi, thank you, Chair Green. So at risk of preempting Chaz, although I don't think he normally speaks during updates, he did remind us before the start of the meeting, and I don't want to be remiss in thanking our Public Works Department. Even though the snow didn't fall, they do all the preparation to get ready for deployment, preparing sidewalks and parking lots, and sanding and getting trucks ready. And then staff on issuing alerts about parking and changes in trash pickup and things like that. So I'm grateful that he reminded us prior to the meeting, and now that his hand's up, he may reinforce this. But I do want to say thank you to staff and all the departments that are involved in responding to a significant weather event. Just because we didn't see the plows going around didn't mean they were already coming into work and prepared to do that for us. And that does take quite a bit of time, and them having them move away from their families to do that work for the evening. So I just want to say thank you to staff, to the DPW, and to our public safety for all that they do to get ready for emergencies, even when they don't turn into emergencies. So thank you.
Chaz.
Yeah, sometimes I speak here, but I usually try and go after all the select board members because I don't want to preempt any of you. Thank you very much for the kind words. I know the team really appreciates it. I wanted to give two brief updates to the community on hiring matters. We're in the process of hiring both a recreation director and a director of the newly established sustainability division in the Department of Public Works. On the recreation director position, I intend to bring to the select board next week a memo outlining the hiring process there in the final stages of putting together an excellent team of advisors on that. And, there's a rich background and history of recreation's efforts and the way that rec has changed over the really last 100 years that it's been a part of Brookline's municipal fabric. As a formal entity. And so I'm very grateful for all the assistance and all the outreach that's already been made by members of the community, interested in making sure that I have a full picture of the community's needs. I'm going to continue those efforts to make sure that I hear from you on the desires of the community so that we pick a rec director who can rise to the challenge and be, as dedicated to the community as the community is to rec. On sustainability, I want to thank the select board for authorizing that hire. We are moving through the hiring process. I anticipate having an update to the board in 2 weeks' time. And you know, by that point, if we don't have a candidate, I will at least run through the process. I feel very confident in the sustainability process. I feel very confident in DPW and the efforts being made there. I have full confidence that that process will meet with community approval. I just want to make sure, since I know that is of such, interest to the community, that people are aware that we are moving forward on that. We have with the board's authorization to create that new position. I will just add, one of the things that we will have to do prior to that kind of line is go before the advisory committee and shift some of the money between departmental budgets. So there will be, that will be another kind of component of this that just needs to happen. It is a procedural step, but it's also a great opportunity to talk with advisory about how important sustainability is. So those are two updates on hiring that I've heard questions on from the community that I just wanted to hand out, put out there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from the select board? Okay, let's go to public comment. Devin, could you lay out the rules and introduce our first speaker, if any?
Thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. Each person tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once 15 minutes has been met, there is an opportunity at the conclusion of the select board's business for additional comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff offline to get a thorough answer and respond via email. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. We have 2 people signed up in advance for the general public comment period, and 3 people signed up later in the meeting to speak on our Zoom meeting protocols. The first person signed up for public comment is Arthur Conquest. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin. Hi, Arthur.
Arthur, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Okay, let's move on to the next person, and maybe we'll get him later.
All right, does not look like, all right, there we go. Now you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and the extended time that you requested has been approved. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Devin. Happy Black History Month, first and foremost. Good evening. My name is Darnell O'Neill, Sr. I'm a Black man, a husband, a father of 4 wonderful human beings. I advocate for equal opportunity, liberation, freedom, and love for all. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 4 on my 4th term, and I sit on the advisory committee. I'm here to talk about America's original sin. here in Brookline, Massachusetts. The negative history, the people part of that history, who are still buried over here on Walnut Street, like I mentioned last week. Human beings who had their very names along with their humanity stolen and ripped away from them. The people whose lives meant opportunity for others, but not for themselves. The same people that were willed to this town along with cattle. Akey, Adam, Ben Boston, Bung, Caesar, Charles, Cuff, Dido, Dina, Exeter, Felix, Laura, George, Great David, Haga, Jack, Jackie, Jane, Jenny, Jeremy, Jethro, John Indian, Kate, Catherine Cuff, Kent, Lemon, Margaret, Maul, Peter, Phyllis, P, Primus, Quaco, Ruby, Rose, Sambo, Seco, Titus, Toby, Town of Quim, Venus, Violet, Warwick, William. There were 18 others listed on documents that were just listed as Negro. I want to thank Hidden Brookline for that. And, please vote yay on the agenda item for them later on a side note. I present these names to honor our ancestors, highlight negative history, past and present, in Brookline, and what we descendants still deal with today. Brookline hasn't honored these 84 souls and their names that weren't mentioned to really honor these souls. Brookline's leadership, needs to lead by example. We do a lot of talking here in Brookline. We need to change honestly what we've been doing and how we look at things over the last 100 years.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Devin. No more saying no or wait, missing all these opportunities. Let me speed up a little bit. We have the lowest income rate, lowest home ownership rate in Brookline. Black people in this town only dream of the American dream, but honestly, we live out the nightmare instead of that dream. Lastly, in the spirit of Black History Month, the Town of Brookline Juneteenth Celebration Founders Committee have begun the planning process for Juneteenth Celebration 2024. We're going to be
You've
reaching
reached
out to
5 minutes.
Thank you. So there'll be more to come on the Juneteenth celebration. We look forward to working with everybody, other departments we've worked with over the last 3 years. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, everyone.
The next person signed up for public comment is Arthur Conquest. Arthur, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable. Your 3 minutes will begin. All right, Arthur, it looks like you're unmuted.
Devin, while we're waiting for his microphone, I'd like to thank Danelle for reading those names. You know, we need to do a lot more in many areas, but one area that I think would be important is to find out more about these individual human beings. You know, what were their lives like? You know, what were their descendants, or who were their descendants? You know, where they came from. You know, this information makes them much more real. And you know, even hearing the names, you know, is a moving experience. But learning about their lives, I think, could really enrich us all. So thank you, Danelle.
I'm going to try and work with Arthur offline to see what's going on with his chat. We have 22 attendees present and no one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Okay, let's move on to miscellaneous items. We have minutes for February 6, 2024. Any edits to those minutes from the select board? Seeing none, I move approval of the minutes from February 6, 2024. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Miriam Ashkenazi,
Aye.
Mike Sandman. I'll take that as an aye.
Aye, yes.
Okay. Paul Warren,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Next, we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 miscellaneous items. The select board has had an opportunity to review the materials related to them. Any questions or comments regarding those items?
May I just point out for those who've been listening that one of those items is the item that was referenced, the grant from Hidden Brookline to the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations.
Right. That's item 3C, question of accepting a donation to the Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations from Barbara Brown in the amount of $600. The donation will be used to support web page management for the Hidden Brookline website, which is very useful use of that money. So any other comments? Let's see. Okay, I move approval of items 3B through 3H. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Miriam Ashkenazi,
Aye.
Mike Sandman,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. So Devin, have you gotten Mr. Conquest fixed up with his microphone?
Looks like we have audio. Arthur, do you want to try speaking? Okay, we can't hear you. Maybe for if you could point your camera down a little bit.
Okay. The other thing, we're going to have public comment, an extension of public comment at the end of the meeting. You can figure out what's going on and speak at that point. Okay, we'll move on. Calendar items, boards and commissions, interviews, Housing Advisory Board, Alex Krieger. Is Alex here?
I'm promoting him so panelist now.
Hello,
Hello.
Alex.
Hello.
Please introduce yourself and your background and why you would like to be a member of the Housing Advisory Board.
Sure. My name's Alex. I've lived in Brookline about 10 or more years. I'm some of the reasons I'm interested in joining the Housing Advisory Board because I'm passionate about civic engagement. I think that community service is important. Primarily, I want to be able to share my knowledge of tenant issues, especially those who receive subsidized housing assistance in a meaningful way. I also describe myself as having necessary skills to engage with the HAB, including communicating while being articulate and collaborative. I enjoy playing chess, soccer. I'm pursuing a degree in environmental science, hoping to work towards in the future a career environmental science and public policy advising.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the select board? Miriam.
Thank you. Hi, Alex. I was looking at your CV and it looks like you've done some really interesting work. Tell me a little bit about the Tech Buddies program.
Sure.
And the Tech Goes Home that you work on with the Brookline Housing Authority, because those sound very interesting.
Sure. Thank you. So I started with the Tech Buddies actually. So I've always I grew up in my generation with technology. My dad worked in technology his whole career, but towards the end of the pandemic, I got involved with teaching and helping people learn skills who mostly seniors and adults with disabilities who may not have those skills and especially needed them when things went remote during the pandemic. I started volunteering and teaching, and I worked for the whole of 2022 and took some time off for school. Yeah, that was kind of that kind of role.
John, you had your hand up.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, actually, Miriam raised the same, highlighted the same volunteer opportunity that Alex has done that I was going to raise. Just so that I was hoping to make more people aware of it. It's a terrific program, but he's involved in so many volunteer activities. We could spend all night just on his volunteer activities. Give me, if you don't mind, a quick sense of what you would like to see HAB accomplish, and how you might play a role as a board member in reaching that accomplishment.
I'm sure. I'm actually I'll be kind of on the learning curve a little bit for the HAB. I understand from talking with the chair, Roger Blood, and looking at some of the materials, and I went to their meeting last week, that their goal is to promote and preserve affordable housing, and then also kind of study housing needs and kind of but I guess my role, as I understand it, would be to bring a personal experience or kind of lived experience with in public housing, to kind of give a perspective or subsidized or affordable housing, kind of give the experience or perspective from that, from living in that environment, to help shape any decisions they might need input in that direction. Whereas the other board members, including Mr. Green, might have different experience, but that's my understanding. My experience would come in.
Yeah. Now, one of the reasons why Roger Blood is enthusiastic about your membership on HAB is you're as you call it, lived experience in public housing. So describe that for us, so we have a sense of what you're talking about. And by the way, I've lived in public housing too. It wasn't the same type of public housing as military housing, which is probably worse. But anyway.
So I guess sharing experience with, I guess, the issues that people may face in public housing. Obviously it's income, it's your eligibility is largely due to income. So people are living at or near poverty lines. That doesn't fully describe everyone or every individual. It doesn't define every individual in public housing, but can play a big role. I think there's other things that I see. I'm very active with my neighbors. I communicate with them a lot. I also, through Tech Buddies, I saw a lot of the other Brookline Housing Authority properties and worked with people there, because a lot of people in the Housing Authority benefited from the Tech Buddies program. I guess skills that people might have challenges with, or common issues that people face, like how to navigate public support or public benefit programs, or how they navigate getting a job if they're able to hold one, things they are challenged with family support, or other issues that typically come up for residents. So sharing those that kind of knowledge, or issues that are generally present for people living in public housing.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Alex, for your candidacy. I share an experience that I wouldn't be sitting in front of you on this board if it wasn't for deed restricted Section 8 housing, which allowed me to get an education and start my life. So I'm really curious about the experience that you talked about briefly, but given the HAB's mission is to advocate and help develop affordable and deed restricted housing. Can you speak just a little bit about the areas where you think we might be falling short, or an area where even if it's in the public housing area, that you think we should be doing more of, in order to create more availability and accessibility to deed restricted affordable housing to low and moderate income people?
To be quite honest, I don't think I can very effectively speak to that. I think I'm gonna share what I can in my knowledge and personal experience with public housing, but I think I'll kind of bounce ideas and share the discussion with the other members of the board who have more experience kind of creating and with housing policy, and kind of reflect and as I said, some of the skills I have is communicating while being articulate and collaborative. I can I may not have all the knowledge about affordable housing law or public policy, or those aspects which other members may, but I think from my understanding of the role, I looked up into the town bylaws that it's the issues that face tenants that I'm kind of is the goal for my knowledge. So just being able to reflect things back and forth with the other board members.
Sure. If I just a follow up, I appreciate that. I don't expect you to be a affordable housing financing expert at all. I'm just curious, from your experience, where do you think the opportunities are? Where are we falling short with respect to public housing and the intersection with the HAB? Because that's where I'm curious. I know, like in the past, we've had some serious issues with maintenance. Is insufficient. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some rental assistance program for folks that are falling behind on rent and at risk of losing their housing. Again, I'm just that was kind of where I was going with it.
Okay, sorry, I may have misunderstood. So falling short, more specifically in the execution and maintenance of public housing, is that what you're asking?
Whatever it is that you think is falling short. I don't mean to lead the witness too much. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I don't know. I don't think, from my experience in the housing authority, I think they're doing a great job. I think there's areas where there's gaps, and I mean it's resources are limited, so I think they do a great job of allocating and being efficient the best they can. I don't know. I don't have a lot of.
That's fair. That's
criticism.
fair. That's a good
Yeah.
enough. Good enough.
Yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I take housing as being a kind of base, and I'm pretty grateful for it. I think it's a great thing to utilize, but yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks. Good answer. Thank you.
And let me just say, you live in public housing, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mike Samna, I think was next.
Right, thank you, Bernard. Thanks for coming forward, Alex. I think it's the housing advisory board, of course, is involved in encouraging the encouraging the Brookline Housing Authority to do its job and help out, but it does many other things. The mission is to promote the preservation and creation of housing broadly, including recommendations on zoning and distribution of housing-related funding, and that's a really important one because it includes the Brookline Housing Trust, and funds will be coming into that from Community Preservation Act tax supplement that we're collecting. So I wonder if you have any thoughts, and if you don't, that's okay. But I do want to just mention to you that you should be thinking a little bit about the role beyond the housing authority.
Yes, I actually had a similar thought in mind as I was responding to Mr. Warren, that my initial impressions or discussions with Mr. Blood was that the Brookline Housing Authority plays a very small role, or only a percentage of a role in the the preservation or development of housing, affordable housing across Brookline, because there's many different kind of ways to, like, there's many buildings that utilize different kind of public funds or ways to make housing affordable rather than just the housing authority. So, and sorry, your question was what are my thoughts
Well,
on?
I mean, it's really important that you realize that, and it sounds like you do, that the Housing Advisory Board does more than just focus on public housing as administered by the Housing Authority. I guess I would say the same thing as Paul. I'm not expecting a set of detailed answers, but I do want to make sure that you recognize and that there's more to it than just the Housing Authority portion.
Yeah, I would say I'm certainly aware. I think some of the skills I have, being observant, analytical, reflective, in my experience last 2 years with the CDBG advisory committee, lends itself well to maybe not having the professional experience that other board members have, but being able to reflect and kind of communicate about the things or topics that they're bringing up.
Okay, John?
I just had a question for one of our administrators, or perhaps maybe any other member of the select board. My understanding is this is a 9-member board, and assuming that hasn't changed, I'm just wondering, is the vacancy that we're talking about one that we anticipate? Because the roster that was provided with the agenda tonight has 9 members in place. So I didn't know whether I had lost track of an addition of a 10th member, or if we're anticipating a vacancy that's not yet in a vacancy.
That's a good question, John. This is Devin, Fields Assistant Town Administrator for Operations. And a few years ago, town meeting expanded the membership of the Housing Advisory Board and also created an additional public housing tenant position. So the current vacancy on this board is a public housing vacancy. So you interviewed someone a few months ago who did not meet that criteria. So that position maintained its vacant status. And then as of today, we received a resignation letter from Jenny Raitt, who will no longer be serving on the Housing Advisory Board or the Community Preservation Act committee as the Housing Advisory Board representative. So that will be a regular vacancy that is available beginning today. So now there are 2 vacancies on this board. And I think we might have put in an old roster, and I apologize for that.
No apology necessary. Thank you very much.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Devin.
Miriam,
Yeah, just quickly, Alex, I just want to thank you for volunteering for this role. And I really can't emphasize how valuable it is to have somebody who really comes with lived experience. So I appreciate that. Because I know it's a little nerve-wracking to interview in front of all of us, and I think you did a great job.
Thanks for sharing that.
He did great.
we're a friendly crowd. Okay, thank you, Alex.
I would like to
Paul,
say,
you have
can I say,
another
yeah, can I say one thing to Alex? And I think this is important that he, I've shared my lived experience many times when I was running for the board, which, really helps inform my thinking about housing and public housing and affordable housing. And I would encourage you to keep doing that. That's what I was trying to get at. I think that, your experience, if you bring that out and the needs of public housing and frankly, what it means to live in affordable housing, it really is really helpful. And be very comfortable doing that. I think that would be important. So I'd encourage you to do more of that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Alex. We will be making decisions on appointments to the Housing Advisory Board at a later meeting, and we'll be in touch with you at that point. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Hey, next, Select Board sponsored warrant articles. I take it Melissa is going to talk to us about that, if there's anything that we're going to sponsor at this point.
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Also, while Melissa gets promoted to a panelist, there she is. I'll
Hey,
hand it over to
Melissa.
her.
Good evening. This is a traditional placeholder that we put before the warrant closes. The warrant is closing on February 28th this year. This is your last full meeting before the warrant closes. Next week, we will be presenting the financial plan, but the agenda will be limited to just that. So using this as an opportunity, if you're working on any committees and those committees might be producing warrant articles that are looking for board sponsorship, or if there are any other articles that you're working on, just opening up the floor for anyone to offer up what they might be filing it for the warrant.
Okay, any discussion of that? Okay, thank you.
I do have my hand up, Bernard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's yellow. I need it to wave back and forth so you can see it.
No, I wasn't looking in that.
I don't have
that part of my screen.
That's okay. I appreciate it. I don't have any specific article suggestions, but I do want to make just a general comment to the public and specifically town meeting. I brought a number of articles to town meeting. I know the amount of work that it is to do it as a sponsor or co-sponsor. And I've also experienced the amount of work it is for advisory and for staff and for finance to, put budgetary numbers on it when it does impact it. And it is a significant amount of work. And in the past couple of weeks, I've had some folks reach out to me on 2 or 3 different subjects. And one of them we're talking about tonight, the Zoom protocol meetings. But I want to encourage individuals that are thinking about bringing an article to town meeting to really reach out to someone on the select board or staff or Chaz, and see if there's a stop on the way to town meeting, which is, could this be addressed through policy or a procedure? Is there an adjustment that could be made that doesn't that can be done to satisfy the need of the problem that they're trying to solve. Short of having to go through the entire legislative process of a warrant article. And we had a conversation today, Chaz and I and some other folks, with an individual that was trying to solve a problem, was thinking about town meeting. And I just want to encourage that it really is, it's a mindset that we're partners. The executive branch can really be a partner with our legislative branch and town meeting, and find creative ways to solve problems without having to go through the entire activity and work to actually bring something through as a resolution or a bylaw. So I just want to encourage that. I personally am very open to hearing and inviting those conversations to see if we can solve problems without having to go through, the entire process of town meeting. So that's what I wanted to say. And I do really appreciate all that staff's doing to support these articles, because it is a lot of work in addition to doing their full-time job. So thank you so much.
Okay. Any further discussion? We'll move on to our next item. Brookline Community Development Corporation Housing Program Proposal. The Housing Advisory Board was asked to relook at their vote regarding a proposal by BCDC to address housing related issues in a fairly broad way. And they were asked to and did vote or revote their decision with respect to $128,000 that would go to the Brookline Community Development Corporation, to focus that money on the proposed rental assistance program that was presented by BCDC. So we're being asked to approve, as our role is, the recommendation to give $128,000 or provide $128,000 to a rental assistance program, some of which would go to, if it is managed by BCDC, 10% fee to cover their overhead. And if it involves a Metro West housing partnership, would go about 12.5% to them to cover their overhead. So unless anyone objects to our approving that use of the funds, I'd like to make a motion. Let me just tell you what it is, make sure that everyone's okay with it. Would be to approve funds from the Affordable Housing Trust for a rental assistance program, but subject to the following three conditions. A formal determination of legality by town council. We had that discussion last week, I think. 2, establishment of a program, and I cite the Somerville model or similar program that has been determined to be in compliance with state law and of course our Constitution, which the Somerville program has. And maybe Chaz can sort of talk about in more detail why that program has been determined to be not in opposition to state law or the Constitution. And just to give people a sense of what that program would involve is that once a tenant is in arrears on their rent, as I understand it, they would be able to enter into a contract with their land or between their landlord and an agency, either BCDC or another agency such as a Housing Stability Office here in Brookline. And that contract, assuming the landlord is willing, would provide funds to the landlord to cover the arrears that the tenant is suffering from. Tenants must qualify as low income, and they must agree to participate in an individual self-sufficiency plan to ensure an ability to not get into arrears in the future. I mean, that's my understanding of this program, but it has been determined to be in compliance with state law and constitutional provision with respect to use of public funds for private individuals, and would be the type of program that would work for us. And finally, selection of the agency that would run the program, whether the BCDC or the Housing Stability Office, pursuant to a procurement procedure. Now, I understand that there is an exception for affordable housing trust to the procurement laws, but I think staff wants to make sure that given certain issues related to this program, that best practices would be to go through a procurement process that ensures that we choose someone that cannot be challenged at any point down the line. So that is my suggestion to implement the recommendation of the HAB. If anyone objects to that or has other ideas, please let me know. Paul?
Yeah, Bernard, I don't.
Can we, Chaz had his hand up. Maybe
Yeah.
to correct anything I said that was inaccurate?
No, just to clarify a couple things. One, unfortunately, a big part of why this issue is coming up is because the Housing Stability Office is more limited in what we can do, right? We can fund programs like this. We can do this kind of development, but it's harder for the government directly to do this kind of work. The reason why this kind of program is legal is because the funds that are being appropriated are specifically funds for the creation or preservation of affordable housing. And so in order for this to work, what this program does is it basically creates a limited one-time contract with a landlord that says, hey, I agree for the duration of this tenant's, period of occupancy that we're going to treat this like it's an affordable housing, the creation of a unit of affordable housing. And the payment of the one-time arrears is the pay down to ensure that unit is de facto affordable for that person, whereas before it wasn't. So that gets you around the issue of, are you providing a windfall to private people? The government has already said the creation of affordable housing doesn't do that. And so if you create affordable housing through a program like this, the Department of Revenue has said that's allowable. So it's a legal fiction of sorts. But, at the same time, it solves the problem that we're looking to solve. It requires more paperwork. And so that's also a reason why we're recommending that we go through a standard procurement process here. And when I say standard, I don't mean dragged out over months and months. I mean, we follow the typical rules of 30B in the procurement process in an expeditious fashion so that we are confident that this stands up to scrutiny. Just because the HAB money, the Affordable Housing Trust money doesn't have to follow this process, doesn't mean it's not vulnerable to attack if there's some concern about how the contract was awarded, the structure of the program, any of those things. So we want to just be very sure that we're not, I talked last week about sleepwalking into policy. We don't want to sleepwalk into policy. We also don't want to accidentally set ourselves up for failure. I'd rather do it once and do it right than have to do it 3 or 4 times, than rush and have to do it 3 or 4 times. I mean, it's something that we see, unfortunately, when we come up against, sometimes the best laid intentions. We struggle with this with the ARPA utility payments, which we are still trying to finalize. We're struggling with, someone says this is a great idea, and then they say go do it, and then we get caught in the execution. So I'm grateful for the opportunity for us to do this once and do it right, so that we can get this money out the door and get funding to people who need it.
Thank you, Paul.
Yep. Thank you, Bernard. So Chaz did get at a little bit of what I wanted to ask about, because I read his memo to us. I came earlier, and I really wanted to understand, Chaz, this creation, how we're getting and dealing with this creation of affordable housing. So my understanding is that what BCDC had been proposing or had been done in the past is that if someone was, had a significant debt up to $5,000, but had proved that, they still had the ability to be able to stay in the housing, whether they had a job or some other income stream, but it was proven that they could continue, and that this just wouldn't be pay off a debt and then they'd still be evicted. And your memo spoke to the fact that the law requires, the programs require that you actually create affordable housing. Can you, it's not clear to me yet how this contract with the landlord gets to this issue of creating affordable housing. Does it, if we were to pay up to $5,000, would the landlord then have to guarantee that that person be able to stay for a period of time to fulfill the contract? That's what I'm unsure of that. And then I have another follow-up question.
Yeah, so the contract, as I understand it, is kind of structured more like, a reduction in rental payments, right? That for the duration of the contract, your rent is reduced because we're paying this lump sum. So and in the case of arrears, right? What you're doing is you're doing that retroactively. You're saying the actual rent was this, and we are subsidizing it. You're getting a subsidy from this program, so that what the person pays is not the full market value of the unit. And so in that way you create, de facto an affordable housing unit because it's subsidized by these funds.
So we would be underwriting, or almost like Section 8, right? Making a contribution. Right.
That's right.
Oh, that's interesting. Is that, right. Okay, so that clarifies it for me. So we would actually be almost underwriting a Section 8 type of program.
Sort of. Oh,
okay,
this is right. This is, if you look at Somerville, they have the capacity to do both one-time lump sum and a sort of more Section 8 style subsidy. What we're thinking of here is obviously more narrowly tailored. We want to, this is the vision of BCDC is that one-time lump sum, because, I don't want to speak for them, but, to the extent that it attracts more applicants, it makes it more, more attractive to just be like, this is not you're not entering into this big new program. You're entering into a one and done deal. There's just paperwork behind it to make it legal.
So let me just use numbers as an example. And I'm sorry, Miriam, I'm still unclear on this. So let's say that the rent is, I don't know, $3,000 a month. I'm just picking it. And the person is in arrears for $5,000. Okay. And if the $5,000 isn't paid off, the person would not be able to stay in that housing. If we paid off the arrears of $5,000, would we still need to have a contract with the landlord that says it can't be $3,000 anymore? It should be $2,500 or $2,000? Is that what you're saying?
My understanding is in those instances, you'd have kind of a retroactive deal or maybe a prospective deal where you have, you basically restructure the rental contract in such a way that you get to the right result, which is the rent stays the same going forward. But the arrears are paid off, and it gives you the flexibility to kind of structure it in whatever way makes sense, so that the monthly rent monthly rent, either past or future, contains a subsidized component, regardless of how that subsidized component is kind of doled out.
Okay, and then my second question is that is this the program that BCDC had proposed, or is this a refinement of their program, and is it something that they said that they could do if we did refine it?
I received a message from Deborah Brown who did say they could do this and they could work on this. It's close to what they were proposing. My initial concern had been, who's getting the check? They were clear that it was originally the landlord, which is important. That's again the accountability of the process, closing the loop on this stuff. So I don't think it's measurably different from what they were proposing. It's just, the structure that the hoops we jump through in order to make sure that we are abiding by the Department of Revenue's guidance on how to make this, an eligible use of the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay, thank you, Jess.
And is that a written guidance, or they just talk to us?
It's written guidance. And, I think, one of the things that gave the HAB pause and was concern was, the written guidance talks about CPA money. And they say, well, hey, this says CPA. It's not about the Affordable Housing Trust. The trick is the language in the law that defines the usage of both Affordable Housing Trust money and CPA money for housing preservation purposes is the same language. And so when DOR looks at that, they're like, okay, let's make this simple. It's the same language. It's the same thing, which is why if you look at that Somerville RFP, you can actually see that their version of the HAB has some responsibility delegated to it from their version of the CPA committee to handle affordable housing stuff. They basically outsourced that component of their CPA funds to their HAB, which they're allowed to do.
Okay, I think, Mike, were you next?
Thanks, Bernard. I think so. The one thing is I listened to this, and I have to say, first of all, that this was discussed 2 weeks ago and I was not here. I was overseas. So in a different time zone, so I couldn't participate. But the one thing I'm hearing that I'm a little concerned, not a little, I'm a lot concerned about it, is the total for administration, which sounds like 22.5%, which is 10% for BCDC and 12.5% for Metro West, who is going to actually be doing the administrative work here from the sound of it. That, to me, that's too much. And I wonder if there's a mechanism that BCDC can work through that will result in a lower amount. And then the other thing, I think it's important to remind people that the Brookline Community Foundation provides a considerable amount of funding through the Brookline Center for exactly this kind of thing. So this is a supplement to what's already being done, and I haven't got any question that it's needed. I just want to make sure that people understand that there are other channels that are doing the same thing, trying to meet the same need.
Yeah, and by the way, the original ask was 22% or 20% for BCDC. So this is a reduction from that, but your point still is a valid point. John?
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, I just want to take my hand down. Here we go. Lower the hand. Okay. So I have a few questions. I'll just sort of ask them all together. Is this going to come back to us for approval of the RFP? That's one question. And there was reference by Chaz to the very good question of whether, given that this is not exactly what was originally proposed to us by BCDC, would they actually be interested in this program now that it's been somewhat changed? And the answer was yes. But I assume that does not imply exclusivity to BCDC, given that there's going to be an RFP. So, it might in fact still be of interest to them in this sort of different form. But if there's an RFP, that suggests that other entities might apply to actually be the program that operates the entity that operates this program. So I'd love an answer to that question. And then I had the same question Mike had. Is there going to be any, as a policy matter, any ceiling on how much of rent subsidy, which is desperately needed in and of itself, how much of rent subsidy appropriations can go to overhead and not to the person who is in need of the subsidy? And given whatever that threshold is for this particular program, is this the most effective use of affordable housing trust funds? I think that's the bottom line question that we have to address here. Of course, let's use affordable housing trust funds to increase the availability of affordable housing opportunities for people. But is this the most effective way to do it? So I think there's three questions there. I hope people were able to keep track of them. I think I'm asking our town administrator first.
Okay.
And
then I know some of the BCDC folks are here. If the chair wants to hear from Deborah Brown, she's available. And to answer the kind of first couple of questions about the procurement process and the efforts there. Yes, it's an open procurement, and it's an RFP, right? So it really is about best qualitative, who best conforms to the qualitative values put out of the RFP. It's not just who pays the lowest, who's the lowest responsive bidder. So that process is important, and make sure that we get the best quality proposal, not just the most cut rate proposal. In terms of review of the RFP, we haven't always done that, but if the board would like to see the RFP, come back and have the RFP seen before it's issued, we can do that. Our kind of aim was to get this done and was to get an RFP out as soon as possible, within 30 days. And then there's a 30-day window there. So, the goal is between, 60 and 90 day turnaround here to be as quick as possible in terms of getting getting this on the road, knowing that the community, there's a community desire for it. But yes, we can bring the RFP, as part of the board, we can do what we do with some other contracts. But and as for the overhead, so 12.5% for Metro West is Metro West standard for these projects. They've run these programs in other communities, and that's their standard overhead. And I think the other thing that's important to know about Metro West is that they don't do this alone, because that was my question too. It's, could we just pick up the phone and call Metro West? Why are we doing this through this kind of telephone chain? It's my understanding that they don't do this alone, that they rely on local community partners to kind of be the eyes and ears of the operation to ensure that they maximize uptake on this. They have the resources to do the kind of back end work, the development of the program and ensuring that, the money is properly, gets to the person it needs to get to, and the contract stuff is all in order. What they don't have is the outreach. What they don't have is the community connection. And so they rely on community partners to provide that connection. And so in that kind of context, my understanding is, in looking at it from that perspective, the HAB and the planning department, there was no immediate concern about the total overhead. We know that it's, whenever you see, an overhead of that level, you kind of want to be sure that it's right. But we think as part of the RFP process, we'll be able to see, what kind of bids we get, and how that qualitatively, how that might have qualitative impact there.
Okay, Paul, I see Deborah Brown has, your hand's up too, Miriam? I didn't.
Yeah, so
You
let
hand
Miriam go
raise
first. Her
function.
hand was up. Yep, please go ahead, Miriam.
Wait, hold on.
I can
Here we
wait.
go. Here we go. I'm willing to let Deborah Brown speak to this, at least, the relevant issues related to the questions that we've raised after the select board has their opportunity to make comments. So Miriam.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. I know, I realized my hand was hard to see with that, so I've tried to move it right over my daughter's picture. He put up there, by the way. I just,
your hand is colored the same color as your ceiling.
yeah.
So I can't, that's why I didn't see it.
Hard to see. So I just want to, I have personally been educated. So I wanted to share that. First, I want to be clear that there's clearly a need for emergent rental assistance. So whether the BCF does it or somebody else, there's a need for everybody to do it. So, but the BCF program, the Brookline Community Foundation, provides funding to the Brookline Center, and they only provide $800 per household over a 12-month period of time. So it's a program. It does do rental assistance, but it's really not kind of targeted the same way. So I just think that's an important distinction to make. So I just wanted to, because I didn't know that. So now that I know that, I'm compelled to share it with you all. That's all.
Okay, was it Paul?
Yeah, my hand was up, and I took it down. So I thought it was confusing. So I guess, and maybe Deb can speak to this, and perhaps Chaz as we go through this process, but it would be helpful to know what is the typical range of overhead for programs like this. I think when we spoke last week or the week before about this, I thought we were sticking with like in the 12% or 10% range. And now I'm hearing 22, which may be right. It'd be helpful to have some benchmark or comparative data to know what is the overhead for programs like this. And I think maybe Deb could speak to it, but it would be helpful to get some data on that as well. Thank you.
Okay, there are two entities that are that need overhead coverage. So it's a little different than your sort of standard benchmark. The other question I'd like to be answered by Ms. Brown is, the Community Development Corporation has been providing low-income housing, affordable housing for people who are homeless and others for a time now. And this seems to be a, what would you call it? Getting on, it's sort of distraction from that program. So I'd like, you to answer, why are you doing this and not focusing on providing the affordable housing that you've been providing all along, which is still desperately needed in this community.
Okay. My name's Deborah Brown. Thank you for the opportunity to address some of your questions. The one that I'm hearing primarily is about overhead. I think we need to be clear about what overhead is. This is not administrative costs. These are the costs associated with having to take some, go to court with somebody. It's the time that's taken to get somebody to sit down and develop a budget. It's the time to give somebody the bad news, maybe that they don't qualify for the program. Not everybody's going to qualify for the program. If the $5,000 is not going to keep you in your house, then we're not going to make the award. It's draconian and it may feel cruel, but we believe that if it's not going to help, then it's probably not the best use of our money. So when you hear that 10% for Brookline CDC, I would guess that probably 3% of it, maybe 5% of it is actually quote unquote overhead, and the rest of that ends up being direct services. And that's everything from making referrals to other places to, just having just helping people navigate, the housing issue. As per why are we
Can I ask a question so that
Sure.
that the remainder of the overhead is for staff salaries, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but staff salaries that are actually working with the tenants.
Okay.
And we've gone to court with people. Oh, pardon me?
That wasn't clear in your proposal, at least to me, maybe.
Well, that proposal's been through so many iterations, it's not even funny. So I apologize for that, Bernard.
No need to apologize, but
yeah.
Maybe when you finish what you want to say, if you could address that issue, I think it'd be helpful to the select board.
What issue?
Who are these staff people that is being paid with this part of the 10% overhead?
Well, the 10% would go to a portion of it would go to the executive director, a portion of it would go to the tenant organizer, a portion of it might go to cover the expenses associated with our finance person.
Okay.
So
I will jump in here. We've talked about this on the planning side, and planning is comfortable with these numbers. This is a one-time RFP, and this is a project where I think the planning department feels that the complexity of it probably warrants this level of costs related to providing the service rather than the service itself, to kind of differentiate that from straight, what we refer to more classically as overhead, benefits, salaries, and stuff like that.
Great, thank you.
So you asked another question, something to the effect. Oh, I did want to say that when I researched what overhead is for most nonprofits, it's like 30 to 35%. I thought that was high myself, Bernard. But just doing a literature search, and if you look at an academic institution, it can be much, much higher. But I wanted to say that you asked the question about why are we providing emergency rental assistance when our mission is providing affordable housing. Well, keeping people in their homes, is part of our mission. And we're not moving away from improving the housing that we do offer, or for that matter, trying to create more affordable housing. We spend a fair amount of time, Bernard, just, I'm happy to walk around with you one day and just show you some of the spots that we're looking at for new housing. Just to tell you that, you know, that's up front on our agenda. We can show you some designs. We are happy to show you some of our plans that we have for rehabilitating our properties and trying to get them to net zero. But yeah, we have not taken our eye off that prize, and it's consistent with what we had in our strategic plan going back to 2021, 2022 when we finished it. So.
Okay, you still have the floor before I move on to Mike Sandman.
Well, you brought up 2 points, and I just wanted to respond to them. I will say thank you for y'all bringing this up again, and hopefully we can get all of this settled one way or the other, because this is an emergency. It's not rental assistance; it's emergency rental assistance, and this is a census group that may not have the problems that a lot of us have in terms of navigating the day-to-day to get things done. And so oftentimes when they come to us, they're in the throes of a crisis. So that is why we're doing what we're doing. If it were just normal rental assistance, I don't think we'd be in this business, but it's an emergency. And right now we're in the throes of a crisis. So thank you.
Okay, Mike, you had your hand up.
Thanks. Yes.
So don't worry.
So having heard Deborah's explanation, I think it would be very helpful in the response to the request for proposal to say that to explain that some of what is covered by that, what I still think of as a fairly substantial total of overhead between the two organizations, is going for people who will be providing direct service. If you have a staff member who is sitting down with someone and helping them put a budget together so that they don't have to come back, and helping them in some other way to get their sort of their financial lives in order, that's a really important service. And that to me is not your accounting office overhead and so forth. So if you can split those two pieces apart, that would be persuasive, at least as far as I'm concerned.
We'll go back. I think we had done it once, but I'll go back and make sure and just shoot y'all a note that sort of breaks out what this actually looks like in terms of numbers.
Right. I think I actually, in some ways, I'm actually asking Chaz when we put the request for proposal out, that we specify that we're looking for sort of where does that how's that 22% going to be spent? And to the extent that it's spent on direct service, it's different, at least in my mind, than being spent on supporting the organization's back office overhead.
Okay, Miriam.
Thank you. I'll try to make this short, but as somebody who writes grants, who works at an organization that requires indirect costs or overhead in the grants that I write, I'd say this. So the Kennedy School overhead rate is 20%. The Harvard Medical School overhead rate is above 80%. I'm not joking. That is real. I actually think 20%, I like you, Mike, we agree on lots of things, but I actually think 20% is reasonable. And in this case, it's two different overheads. That's 22.5%, which I think is important. And Deborah, I would also make sure that that's really clear that the Metro organization won't work without a partner. So it's a requirement. So in the end, what you're really talking about is 10% overhead. And I think that's reasonable for this kind of work. Because we have to pay people to do the work, and we should pay them to do the work. That's also the right thing to do. So I just wanted to say that I am comfortable with this proposal. I am ready to vote on it. So that's it. I'll mute myself.
I think John was next.
Paul was next,
Paul? Okay, sorry.
but I can let John go.
No, it's fine.
I'll
Paul,
fight
go ahead,
over it.
please.
I had the right colored hand up. So I want to make sure I understand what we're voting on tonight. Right, so we're not voting on a contract with BCDC. It sounds like we're voting on moving this concept forward. The money that's been allocated by the HAB, we're agreeing that that's the amount of money. We're agreeing to take the advice of the town administrator, which is saying that this program needs a little bit of tweak, and that will be put into an RFP and sent out for bid. And then it would come back to us for I assume a review and final contract signing for awarding the contract. Is that what we're doing tonight?
I thought, that's what I thought we were doing.
Okay, that's
Is that
helpful to me.
correct, Chaz?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and I think Miriam had just advised Deb, but I would advise concur for the RFP that if there are two entities that are needing to partner, they both need to be included in the RFP response so we understand who we're going to be working with, because I assume we may get other responses other than BCDC's. So.
But not at our bottom line rate.
Not even, you're a good value, Deb. I get it. Thank you.
If I can ask a question related to that of Chaz, the Housing Stability Office, if it's up and running by this time, could also be an applicant under this RFP.
No, unfortunately. Yeah, we're
okay.
So right. That hasn't. So the only other applicant I can, so I don't want to say, there are other entities out there that might do this work. The only other, well, the only other applicant that, type of applicant that would be mentioned in this is the housing authority. The housing authorities have the authority to run programs like this per the Department of Revenue. So if they bid on it, they bid on it. But, I haven't seen any indication from Michael Alpern or their team that they have interest in this. They are, they're trying to maximize their own efforts towards capital and refurbishment and all of those things.
Yeah, and they have
and we work closely with them.
Yeah. The Housing Authority has access to resources like the RAFT program, which is a state program, and other private charities that is very helpful for their work. So they do an incredible job. John?
Thank you one more time. And before I say anything else, I want to make clear that I thank Deborah and I thank BCDC for this proposal being something we're discussing tonight and having been something that the HAB has discussed. It's a creative approach. It's a different approach. It's, I think, taking a little bit of time for us to all get our heads around it. And I'll be honest, I'm still not convinced, but I'm going to defer to the judgment of the Housing Advisory Board that this is the best possible use of that money from their funds. It doesn't fit with my sense of what would be the best use of HAB funds, which are kind of the uses that we're more accustomed to, that result in partnerships and leveraging of funds from other sources and result in permanent housing being created that is there 20 years later, 30 years later. This is transitory. It's got some significant overhead built in. And when the money runs out, so does the impact of the program. And unless HAB is ready to say that they should change their mission and do this kind of program on a regular basis, because it's actually better than what they traditionally have done, I'm not sure why they decided that this was a good use of affordable housing trust funds, but they did. And I'm going to defer to them on that. And also, I think Deborah's made a pretty good case that the overhead is not extraordinary. So I'm going to just set aside that concern as well.
I think it's clear that this is, with respect to HAB, my assumption is that this is a one-time funding of a program like this. HAB has a lot of obligations or a lot of calls on this money, including the BHA project down in Brookline Village, which is critical, in my opinion, to our affordable housing work here in Brookline. So anyway, any other discussion on this? Okay, so
Thank you all.
Okay, I proposed a motion, which I will read. I don't think anyone objects to this. So I move to approve the use of Affordable Housing Trust funds for a rental assistance program subject to formal determination of legality by town council, establishment of a legal program using the Somerville model or similar model determined to be in compliance with state law and constitution. And 3, selection of the agency to run the program pursuant to a best practices procurement procedure. Any objections to that motion? Okay. It is so moved. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Miriam Ashkenazi,
Aye.
Mike Sandman,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Okay, thank you.
If I may just jump in just for housekeeping purposes, it's 7:15. You did have the noise bylaw hearing scheduled for 7. If you want to take that out of order, just to kind of move it out of the way.
Yeah, I'd like to do that unless anyone objects. We have only one, let's see, what do we have on the agenda after that? Just one major item, and that is the Zoom protocol. So that's going to take some time, so we might as well do this now. Okay, so I think we know who's appearing for, let's see.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mary Mulroney. Good evening.
Yes. Good evening.
Welcome to the select board. Tell us
Thank you.
about the noise bylaw request or waiver request.
So National Grid is applying for a state permit for MassDOT permit for Route 9 at the intersection of Hammond Street. And part of their requirement is to have a noise by waiver, a law waiver from the town of Brookline. And what National Grid is proposing to do is to make the restoration repairs of patches at Route 9 at Hammond Street in the intersection there. And it would take, weather permitting, it would take no more than 2 nights. And I'm sure you're familiar with the intersection. It's not in a residential, so to say, neighborhood. It's CVS, the tennis club, a construction site, and a bank. And we just need permission if you would grant that to us, because Brookline is going to be applying a bond wearing course along Hammond Street and crossing over Route 9 in 2024. So we'd like to make our restorations ahead of theirs.
Okay, any questions from the select board? John?
Thanks. I just feel obligated to make sure that we do not assume too much from the description that was accurate as far as it went, whether there's any nearby residences who might find the noise objectionable. Everything Mary Mulroney said was correct about that intersection, but it is also true that one building removed from the corner she described, you get into some triple-decker housing, many units of housing in triple-deckers. Perhaps there's a double-decker in there, I'm not sure. But there is housing. From a short distance, people in that housing can look out their rear windows to the intersection that is being described. So there will be noise impacts, and I don't want them to feel that we didn't even know they exist.
Okay. Could, Ms. Mulroney, can you discuss what type of noise you're going to be making at this intersection?
Well, they would start the work at 2100 hours. The permit request is for safety reasons along Route 9 for their work. And it would be, the crews are very aware of the surrounding people. in buildings. So they would do the digging probably on the earlier side, and there's a possibility that this job could be done in one night too. If they did the digging and then had the gravel and the road packed for compaction, and then do the fill. So I'm sure they wouldn't be digging at 1 a.m. in the morning. It would try to go on the side of 2100.
And you're not doing repairing utilities or anything. You're just patching.
Correct. We're just digging out there's a temporary patch in the road, and it's not up to Brookline standards or National Grid standards for that matter. And with Brookline investing in 2024, the bond wearing material over Hammond Street, across from Route 9, we don't want them going over it, and then having it have to go back and address it after the fact. So we're trying to be proactive and get it to be perfect.
All right. I think, Paul, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a quick question in the comments. So this is already a restricted area, right? Because of the construction project that's going on. I think they've taken one of the lanes, the northbound side of Hammond Street at the intersection of Route 9. And is the patch, so this is an existing patch that is going across, is it all both sides, and the northbound and southbound, or is it only on one side?
It's right in the intersection.
Yeah.
It's really on Route 9.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yes, it's in that intersection. And but if you continued on Hammond to cross over to come into West Roxbury from like Middlesex Street, you would go over it.
Right.
As soon as you get to the middle. That's why the MassDOT is requiring this, so that Brookline is aware that we're going in. But it's right in the intersection. The construction, you are right. There is a lane restriction there.
And there is, and just to be clear, I mean, this is a really busy area, right? We've got traffic for schools, we've got commuter traffic, and it doing this at night actually probably makes a lot of sense than tying things up during the day. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, John. You're muted, John.
Thank you, Bernard. Sure enough, no sooner did I mention that there are residents who live within earshot of this than one of them shot me a text and asked the question, how will the nearby residents be notified that the work is about to take place, so that if, for example, they have any options to seek sleep elsewhere, they can exercise those options?
Surely. The goal is for the if everything goes according to plan, it will be between April 15th and the 19th of 2024.
And will there be a notification immediately prior to the start of the work that goes out to nearby residents?
Yeah, I could make that part of the stipulation. Yes.
I think they would appreciate it.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think Mike, you had your hand up.
Yes, Bernard, I think Devin is trying to get your attention, and she's not raising her digital hand, but rather her.
Okay, I'm sorry, Devin.
Go ahead, Deb.
Did you try to text me?
I did.
I'm on airplane mode. I'm not sure I get text.
That's okay. Thank you, Mike, and the chair. I just want to quickly share the staff perspective. Commissioner Shute wrote in that this work has been reviewed by the Engineering Transportation Department, and it is supported. National Grid is currently doing some daytime work right now at Lee Street and Chestnut Hill Ave intersection, and the backup is incredible. It's causing a lot of disruption, and that's work that's happening during the day. So we believe that nighttime work is absolutely the way to go here. The evening work will reduce the overall duration of the project and the impact to the traffic and congestion. While noise may be bothersome for a few hours, it will be less of an impact overall to both residents in the corridor than conducting this work during peak commute times. One recommendation is that the work does not start on the 15th, as that is Patriots Day and Marathon Monday. So we are requesting, not the start
Perfect.
date of the 15th, but the 16th instead.
Okay.
And I will point out that that's the beginning of April vacation, so it would be reduced traffic as well. So I think it is April vacation.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, this is a public hearing. So unless any select board members have further comments or questions, I'd like to open up the hearing to the public. Devin, do your magic.
At this time, there are 22 attendees. If folks would like to make a comment, they can use the Q&A or hand raise feature. Arthur, I see your hand is raised and I will promote you to a panelist.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay.
I did just want to confirm that this is a public hearing on this noise bylaw waiver request. Is that what you want to make a comment on at this point?
No, I don't want to. Okay. And I'll wait till the end of the meeting if that's possible. Okay.
Yes.
I thought you said that this was open to the public and that we could speak. And so I raised my hand, but I'll wait until the end of the meeting and then make my comment, which was supposed to be at the original public comment.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Arthur. Appreciate you
But-
sticking it out and
Okay.
getting the tech all settled.
Thank you. Look forward to talking to you in 5 minutes or whatever. Okay.
At this time, there are 22 attendees and no one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Okay, before we vote, I'd like to sort of thank National Grid for following up on John Van Scoyak's request for notification of residents. You may not be making a lot of noise, but it's always good to, as a courtesy, let residents know that there is going to be some activity near their homes that may or may not interrupt their sleep or interrupt their evening. So unless there are any other comments from the select board, I'd like to move approval of the noise bylaw waiver for National Grid work at Route 9 and Hammond Street between April now 16th to the 19th for repairing of damaged patches in the street on Route 9. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyak,
Aye.
Miriam Ashkenazi,
Aye.
Mike Sandman,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Okay, thank you, Ms. Maroney.
Thank you very much for your time. And thank you for pointing that out, Devin, about the 16th. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Okay. Devin, are you running in the marathon? That's why you know this?
Oh, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay. Okay, now we have public meeting. I'm sorry. No, my notes here are confused. Zoom protocols. This is a discussion of our Zoom protocols. And I guess I'd like to start off by saying that in our discussion, we must keep in mind the words of that great rock star philosopher, Grace Jones. And I'm turning her around a little, but I would say that it may be perfect for you, but it may not be perfect for everyone. And I say that to say, let's try to figure out a way that we can address everyone's concerns with respect to the change that we may be implementing with respect to our Zoom public meeting protocols. You know, a lot of people think that it's a slam dunk that we do this, but there are people who think that there are problems that may not be significant to me or you, but could be significant to other people. And for example, the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee was Zoom bombed a couple weeks ago. You know, the committee didn't think it was a big deal, but the type of vile anti-Semitic and racist comments that were made could have been traumatic to some people. And just keep that in mind. It may not mean we do anything different, but you know, let's not leave anyone out of our considerations. So with that, let's see. Before we hear, okay, let's first hear from comments of the public, and then we'll open it up to the select board. And as I think Devin mentioned, I will give up to 15 minutes for comments on each of the following items. Zoom meeting protocols, and then later on, our policy on recording of public meetings, which is a separate policy and will be dealt with separately. And we will vote on the recording policy, but I want to give the Zoom meeting protocols policy some time to sort of be digested by the select board, to be you know, thought through so that we get it right. So and just note that in addition, the select board received a number of written comments from I think 4 or 5 people, and I think it can be assumed that everyone has read those comments. So we appreciate when people send in written comments, that they are read and they are taken into consideration. So Devin, do you need to read the rules on public comment, or is we just go for it?
I think the rules hopefully will stand from the beginning of the meeting. We have a couple of seasoned public commenters joining us. So the first up is Neil Gordon. Your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Devin. And seasoned as I am, should I stray rules, please let me know. Neil Gordon, I'm Precinct 1 town meeting member and a member of the advisory committee, and I'll get right to the point. Hybrid and remote meetings should replicate in-person meetings to the extent that technology allows. I say this less as a matter of tradition and more as a matter of transparency and good town government. We have collectively attended countless in-person meetings where we can hear and watch every speaker. We can also watch those not speaking, including members of the public. The public should see what members of the body sees, including smiles, frowns, nods, and head shakes, subtle as some of those may be. All of that included in what's commonly called body language. The open meeting law might call it something else. They might call it deliberation. As to members of the public, it's only fair that if members of the body know who's attending a meeting, so should we. We should see who raises their hand to speak and who doesn't. I urge you to establish a policy that delivers the highest level of transparency. To me, open Zoom, a format the advisory committee has successfully used for years. I need not describe the other, less transparent options. A side note about attendees. It's tempting perhaps to call us the audience, the passive root of which suggests we're just here to listen. But we all know we're more than that. We're the public with a long town of Brookline history of doing much more than just listening. No one refers to those in the stands at Fenway Park as, quote, the audience, unquote. They're fans or the crowd. We're fans or the crowd. They're part of the team. So are we. So make it your policy that all boards, committees, and commissions under your jurisdiction use the open Zoom format. If you feel a need for exceptions, use the word except and describe either the limited circumstances warranting an exception or a process for granting one. And I thank you for your time.
The next person signed up for public comment is Alex Leibowitz. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable. Your 3 minutes will begin.
Thanks, Devin. And I'll keep it very brief because I think Neil really summed up a lot of the arguments better than I could. I wanted to join a number of my town meeting colleagues in urging the board to consider amending the existing Zoom policy to, as Neil put it, make the exception rather than the rule, the use of the webinar format. I think it will create more transparency around public meetings, but I did want to share and just add, from my perspective, the experience that we had with the Moderators Committee on pilots. We used the webinar or the virtual meeting format throughout the course of our committee process. And what we found was that it did encourage more collaboration and it did encourage more spontaneous participation, not just from committee members, but from the members of the public who were interested and attended those meetings. Offhand, I can recall a number of instances where members of this board, members of the advisory committee, people who had in many cases unique insights and experiences regarding certain properties in town or existing pilot agreements were more able and encouraged to participate in our deliberations and in our review process. And I know that that enriched and strengthened our work and the final product that we produced. So I just wanted to add my voice to the chorus and urging the board to consider moving forward with these changes to the policy. I think the memo outlining additional safety concerns and guidelines that can be put in place was very thorough and provides a path forward for moving to the virtual meeting format while not risking unintentional injury or the empowerment of abusive or hateful public comments. So I think we have a clear path forward. There are potential benefits to be gained here, as demonstrated by advisory, by a number of committees that have been using this format. And I would encourage the board to strongly consider adopting this policy as recommended. Thank you.
At this time, there are 20 virtual attendees. If someone would like to make a comment on this, here we go. I'm promoting Elizabeth Stillman. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Great, thank you. I am Elizabeth Stillman. I am the chair of the Brookline Commission for Women. I would just want to note that in the packet of information that is attached to this agenda, we are misnamed as the Women's Committee. We are the Commission for Women. We were hate bombed last week on our Zoom meeting. There were 3 members of the public who came and said incredibly vile, racist, anti-feminist, and anti-Semitic things. They were very brief, but I am concerned about having the discretion to either call on people or not call on people. That might come with a more open format. I am concerned that under the open meeting law, we are considered a public forum. And I don't wish to have the discretion to call on people or not call on people and potentially violate their First Amendment rights. There are cases before the US Supreme Court right now about social media and the ability of the public to either be on your social media or be part of your meetings. So I wish that we had a uniform policy across the entire town that we run past town council, of course, that would not give that kind of discretion to the chairs of the boards. I got a million texts during all that hateful speech saying cut them off, and we can't. We cannot cut people off unless they make threats. But I can tell you this, had that been a simulation of a live in-person meeting, and I could see all of the people there, and if they had come to a live meeting, I would have felt threatened. Absolutely. And I can assure you, and I appreciate Chair Green saying the same thing, as somebody who was Jewish at that meeting, I did feel threatened, but they didn't make threats. And it was horrifying and traumatic. So as much as I believe that having an open meeting is a good idea, and obviously we're required to do so, I'm not sure that we need to open it in a way that makes people feel like they cannot participate in government because they are frightened. That's it. Thank you.
At this time, there are 21 participants. No one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you, everyone. Let's make sure we name the Commission for Women correctly going
If I
forward.
wanted to sincerely apologize to the Commission for Women, that's my fault. Trying to get that out the door with the budget, and it is entirely on me. I apologize.
Yes,
No,
it's not a big deal, but let's just make sure it doesn't happen.
we should be done right. It's an important commission, and we need to name it correctly. So thank you for the correction.
Okay. So, how are we going to do this discussion? It's a discussion, and hopefully out of it will come some direction to staff to put together, whatever amendments or changes to our policy that we suggest. But I'd like to ask a few questions, if you don't mind. I mean, just 6 questions, I think. And they are, do people want to be able to see just a list of everyone in the meeting? Or is it important that people see the actual faces of everyone in the meeting? I'm not really clear on that. And of course, that would not include people on phones or watching on big, or people who've turned off their screens or whose screens are turned off by the host. But everyone else, is that the issue? And do we want boards and commissions to be able to seek exceptions from the select board or the staff? Should we do this as a pilot program? Should boards and commissions be trained and required to use certain procedures to ensure security concerns are addressed? There are a lot of things that we can do, and maybe that solves most of the problems we have. And finally, and maybe this is just me, but I would like to ask whether we should ban all signs or symbols from people's screens, or should we just limit it to political signs or symbols? I say that because that's one way in which people can be traumatized. I mean, you have a swastika in someone's background. I mean, that's going to be hurtful to a number of people. And there are other symbols that can equally be hurtful, including ones that may be seen by some people as innocent, such as the Israeli flag or the Palestinian flag. Those can be interpreted by some people in different ways than maybe we would interpret them. So I think those are things we should just that should be considered as we try to come up with a final policy. So I think that Miriam was first.
Thank you, Bernard. So originally, when this was brought to my attention through letters and emails, and I didn't actually, to me, seemed fine to do this switch, but it has occurred to me that I will personally have a problem if the select board moves to that format, and I'll explain. So for those of you who I think most of you know, I am hard of hearing. I rely on both my hearing aids, or all my hearing aids, closed captions, and lip reading and body language reading. And lip reading is a lot of what I do. And if you imagine 33 faces on this screen right now I could put it on speaker view, which pins the speaker, right? But then I don't see anybody else, or I see just the 3 people who are at the top. And I do a lot of body language reading to follow what's happening. And so it would make it very, very challenging for me personally. Now, that said, there are clearly a lot of people who are really invested in this change. So I would agree to vote on this change, but I like the idea of a pilot. And frankly, I like the idea of being able to appeal to the select board for exceptions, because I'd like the select board to make an exception for itself. It's really, really important for me to be able to see all of you during this meeting. And I don't know how I would be able to do that. I'd be looking at 30 faces, and it would be very, very hard for me to follow. So, so I just want to bring that up as a real concern. Otherwise, I think, look, Zoom bombing it's going to happen, whatever format, I think. If people feel very, very strongly about switching the format, I'm fine with that, but I think we need to be able to make exceptions, and I would implore us as a select board to make that exception specifically to accommodate my disability. And that I do think we should do it as a pilot in case we find out, in fact, it does actually make a big difference, and we can always revert back. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mike, I think, is next.
Yes, thank you. So I put together a note that was intended to be circulated to the other select board members, and hopefully it got there in one form or another about this. My perspective on this is that let's take Miriam's questions and Bernard's questions. First of all, with regard to a pilot, this has been done as a pilot by the advisory committee for 4 years. Or 3.5, 4 years now. It's the technology that is behind the webinar, is behind the meeting platform. It's just as possible to cut someone off if they get off topic, which is a reason to cut them off. It's possible to call on people based on they're raising their hands or putting their names in a chat box and doing it in order. So it's possible to keep pretty good control over things by using the tools that are there. And certainly we have to teach people how to use them, but they had to learn how to use the webinar too. So, we have that capacity. I think and one of the things I put into my note was I definitely want to see the ability, our ability to have exceptions to this. There's no question about that. And the comment that I made was that, and I'm speaking to and for my select board colleagues, we saw the consequences of the word shall without providing for exceptions when we considered whether to call a special town meeting, even though the petitioner wanted to withdraw their article. Shall said that we were breaking the law if we didn't. And we broke the law because we thought it was, well, I think as Bernard said, the law is not a suicide pact. So we should learn from that experience and provide an off-ramp from shall, certainly in this instance. I have to say I'm a little shell shocked from that. Sorry. The idea of banning signs is a very sensible one. I really like that. I think that makes a great deal of sense. And by the way, it applies to webinars as well, because someone can be promoted in a webinar and have something objectionable in there behind them. So I think it's possible to move this, provide for a limited number of exceptions. I definitely feel this should be moving to a meeting platform should be the default. And as long as there's a mechanism for providing for exceptions, it seems to me like we can do that without fear that we're going to wreak havoc in some way. As to who should be in charge of setting exceptions, I had suggested that it simply be the chair of the select board or their designee. Paul suggested that it should be the select board as a whole. I don't care either way. I think it should be an elected official rather than a staff member.
Paul.
Hi, thank you, Bernard and Mike and Miriam. First, I want to acknowledge what people have said, from the Women's Commission Women, these, I got it wrong, didn't I, Miriam? Thank you. See the body language, I get the signal right away, like, Paul, you messed it up. Very helpful, thank you. You threw me way off. But I want to acknowledge that, people have had very bad experiences. And I don't want to minimize that at all. I've sat through, Mike might have been there, but we got Zoom bombed horribly early when we moved to online. I think it was during maybe a land use subcommittee, and it was terrible. We had no idea how to do anything. It went on for way too long. But I am so protective of our democratic process that I do not want us to be intimidated out of participation by, fools being able to come in from wherever they're coming from and take advantage of technology, which they can do in either a webinar format or an open meeting format, and have that impede the very, very special, unique thing that we have, which is our open democratic process of participation. And I think responding in a way that inhibits open meetings by shutting it down or limiting it, I actually think gives them what they want if we were to do that. So I'm supportive of a modification to the policy. I do want to tell you, I do have my own Zoom account. I've got all the features, and Zoom has done quite a bit already to improve the platform to respond to Zoom bombing. So as a host or a co-host, there's a security menu, and under that menu, you can, if something were to happen, you can almost with one click, you can suspend all video and audio participation without kicking people off the meeting, but you can quickly stop it and inhibit it. Where before, I think we've struggled, and if you're not trained properly, you would still struggle. To be able to do that. So I think that's important. I think the technology has advanced quite a bit. I am certainly with Mike that the word "shall" can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. So I do think we should have an exception. I circulated to my colleagues a draft of an amendment to the amendment that the petitioners of this board had suggested to us. And I'm hoping that we could review that tonight. I realize we're not voting, but I do think that it's something that I'd like to see us support. But I am sensitive to the fact that, some folks are going to need training on this. We can't just assume this is an overnight change. It's going to need to be ramped in. I like the idea of because it is a policy, and we're not having the petitioners race and go pass a bylaw. I'm hoping that if we were to implement a policy change, that we could revisit that policy change in 30, 60, or 90 days and see if it's having the desired effect. But I do think that, this is similar to what I had mentioned earlier in the evening, where we have some town meeting folks coming that are trying to solve a problem. They're asking this board to take action from a standpoint of policy. And I think that's a good way to be doing business and finding a collaborative approach without having to go through this through the bylaw and suddenly trying to undo a bylaw in the future. So anyway, I support it. I hope that we can review the amendment and have a substantive discussion about it. And I appreciate all the public comments and the concerns.
Okay, John?
Yes, thanks everyone for their comments. And thanks for those from the Town Meeting Members Association who have brought this question to the forefront. I think it's an extremely important question, and I will associate myself, which I do not often say this, with the remarks of Neil Gordon. And I don't want him to take too many liberties with that. This might be the only time. I thought he expressed it very well. There's something unique to the nature of an in-person meeting. And granted, a hybrid meeting isn't exactly the same as an in-person meeting. Some of it is virtual, some of it is people in the room, but you've got to get as close as possible to an in-person meeting if you want to be as close as possible to true democracy. And we've heard, the horror stories, and they absolutely are horrifying. I expressed my regret to Elizabeth Stillman that she and the other members of the Commission for Women were subjected to what they were subjected to. There have been others, and I've been at meetings where we were subjected to some pretty vile stuff. But the nature of democracy is if it's to be true democracy, it's going to get you're going to open the door. You're going to open the door, and then you see who comes in, and those who come in might get rowdy sometimes, but that's okay. Let's not forget sometimes those who get rowdy are fighting for important causes. And sometimes getting rowdy is the only way that they can be heard. Others are simple, mischievous pranksters and haters. And they think they get some sort of kick out of subjecting people to vile language and vile behavior. But there are controls that recognize that. And we need to learn how to use the controls. What we can't do is allow the presence of those people to take away our opportunities for true democracy, the democracy of face-to-face participation, the democracy of people putting their views out and being able to accept that some people in the room might groan, might turn away, might raise their hand desperately for a chance to rebut. But that give and take, if we ever lose that give and take, we'll have lost democracy. And so we're going to do the best we can with this new way of approaching, with this way of approaching things. I think we're probably going to vote tonight to adopt what is more along the lines of what the Town Meeting Members Association has requested of us. I think it might help if Paul, is Paul's amended language the language that will be in front of us for a vote? And if it is,
No, we're not going to vote tonight. We're going, that will be, part of what is presented to staff. I assume that that's acceptable as staff vote.
So that we're not debating this in a vacuum. I, for one, think it might be a good idea just for the public to hear what that language is so they have an idea of what we're debating here. But that's just my suggestion.
Yeah, I was gonna go over, all of the things that come out of this discussion so that someone can write them down and begin working on revising this. Chaz had his hand up.
Yeah.
No, but I think the point is valid, and if Paul wants to talk through what his proposal is before I had a couple of small housekeeping things.
All I want to mention is, Bernard, I would like, for the benefit of the board and also for the public, to actually at some point have Devin display the amendment to the policy that I distributed to the board so that we could discuss it and see if it's in the direction that we want to go into, where we may have a vote next week on this. And I do think that this is something that, does require some action in the near future, just given, where things are heading. So anyway, that's my thought. I do hope that we can review it, Bernard, and not wait for next week.
Well, I'm sorry, review your proposed amendment.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's only one sentence, so why don't we, Devin.
Well, it's more than so Bernard, it is more than one sentence. So okay.
Yeah, okay.
Now I can see it. And Chaz, I'm sorry that this is getting ahead of what you wanted to see.
No, go for it.
So if you just scroll up to the top, Devin. So this is the policy, the remote participation policy, for the benefit of the public and frankly myself, because I wasn't here when this was voted. That was voted back on September 20th of 2022, and it's entitled the Remote Participation Policy. And this policy was voted into effect by a prior select board that was in office on September 20th of 2022. And so what you're looking here is the language of that policy. Now, if Devin were to scroll down to where the changes have been made, there you go. Item 5 is a change amendment that had actually been proposed by some of the Town Meeting Member Association members. They sent us this amendment, and the language that they suggested is underlined. And so it says, for the purposes of improving public transparency, access, and engagement in town government, all boards, commissions, and committees that elect to conduct their public meetings and hearings remotely using a video conference method of remote participation shall, and I'm going to skip this next sentence, use the Zoom open meeting platform or its equivalent instead of the Zoom webinar platform or its equivalent. The chair, as well as any staff person assigned to such board, commission, or committee, shall be trained in the methods that are available in the open meeting platform for removing disruptive attendees or participants as provided in GLC 30, blah, 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 chapter 30. What the amendment that I've made, frankly, with Mike Salman, is this bolded language that's italicized. And so we were both concerned about the shall, because it locks you in. And this next sentence, except when temporarily authorized by the select board, is the room that allows a board to come to the select board and say, we are under significant duress. We've been targeted. We need a reprieve for a little while, for whatever the reason may be. And this board would be able to grant that temporary reprieve from using the open platform and move to the webinar. But they may say, we just want to do it in person for a little while to get away from this nonsense. So that's the adjustment, the amendment that we made to the policy, Bernard.
Okay. Could someone make a note of that? Devin, I don't mean to impose on you in your final days here, but
well, they have it.
That's one thing that should be on our list of things to discuss. Chaz, did you want to continue?
Yeah, just a couple of small housekeeping things on this. One, I think, it would be difficult, I think, to build into this, and I think we should leave it perhaps for another time. This question of, can you ban signs? Can you ban symbols from people's backgrounds? I think it's just, it runs the risk. If you limit it to political signs, then you're in viewpoint discrimination territory. Even if you don't, you're still in kind of a what is a sign territory. You've got some books behind you, Bernard. Does that mean you're making an intellectual statement? It's in this fervent anti-intellectual culture. I don't know if we want to get into that sort of engineering. As Paul mentioned, there are very robust security controls in the classic Zoom meeting format that weren't there before, which is very helpful. But I think there too, there's a policy line there that right now you can kind of lead to that you can leave to discretion, or you can comment further on, which is, the recommendation in my memo from yesterday is that if you run this in a webinar, in a non-webinar format, in the classic Zoom meeting format, that you make clear the differentiation between attendees and panelists by having panelists be pinned, have them be meeting co-hosts so that they're front and center. And then, except when recognized by the chair, people's cameras are off and they are not allowed to use their avatar as a background, or their background, and that's not allowed to be displayed. They're not allowed to mute or unmute at will, so that the meeting can't be disrupted. But there's still a way for people to see participants and people present. But I hear too from some folks, they say, well, can we see body language? Can we see this and that? That doesn't allow you to see body language. It does just allow you to see the participants and have them on kind of the same square. And then the last kind of thing that I wanted to just bring to the board's attention that is also perhaps for another day is the issue that Ms. Stillman identified, which is that one of the, which I think has been now mentioned a couple of times, we have this discussion about particularly smaller committee meetings as being very collegial, very informal, encouraging this cross-pollination between members of the public. And that's great. And that's a really lovely kind of feature of those smaller committees, if given the discretion to run the meeting in that way. I think when you scale that up to other committees, for example, for example, the Zoning Board of Appeals, that's not the same environment. And I don't think you want to try and say, well, the zoning Board of Appeals or the Select Board for that matter operates in the same manner. There is you want to encourage public participation, you want to encourage public input, and you want the public to feel welcome at these meetings, but you also want to create the opportunity to be clear in these in other meetings, the kind of roles and responsibilities of the players. And I think too, you just have to be very cautious, regardless of what meeting format you use, about the ability in those larger or more formal meetings of the chair to recognize people informally, because that is an invitation to viewpoint discrimination, even if it's totally unintentional. You say someone in the audience who has has their hand up waving frantically, they know something, they know something about this, this person, you like them, you let them speak for 3 minutes, someone puts their hand up who wants to talk about, I don't know, it's about public health, and they want to talk about how we should end the vaccine program because vaccines are the devil, and you say, I don't want to hear from that person. That's viewpoint discrimination. And you might say, okay, well, the cost of doing, rather than giving people the discretion and getting them caught in that situation, having policies in place to ensure that the public can be heard and meaningfully participate. But the temptation to say, I don't know about that viewpoint, is taken out of the hands of folks so that they don't run the risk of making that mistake. It's a hard needle to thread, but I do just think it's important for you and the boards and committees you appoint to be aware that even in those less collegial settings, even in those more collegial settings, if you allow it for one person, you must allow it for everyone, and that's why it's good to have rules in place, even if they are very informal rules, about how people speak, to ensure that you are not either derailed, or in some ways worse, that you accidentally discriminate against someone for validly expressing an opinion they were allowed to express.
Mike.
Yeah, a couple things. One is I would say that there's been reference made to the Zoom bombing and so forth, and in running advisory committee meetings over a period of a couple of years, I think we were Zoom bombed at the full meeting once, and it took a couple of minutes or so to get rid of it, get rid of the people who were intruding. I will say, however, that meetings, it's not just online meetings in which someone can come forward with unpleasant language. We had that here where someone came and told us that we were racists, and someone stood up and said, I know where you live, Mike. Or we know where you live, Mike.
Right.
Which, and as I said, my personal response was, well, I know where you live too. But it could have been perceived as a threat. And there's no guarantee when we're in the public eye. There's no guarantee whether it's a digital meeting or an in-person meeting, or even a webinar where someone gains, someone raises their hand, wants to speak, gets promoted, and makes some outrageous statement. So that's going to happen, and it's part of the price of being a volunteer in these circumstances. Or, well, I'll leave it at that. I will say that in terms of scaling up, it's a matter of using the controls that are available, and certainly one of the things that can be done is to use one of the members of a group or a staff person, if that's available, as we do here for that matter, to monitor the chat box and have a policy, and we could write it into a policy that the chat box should be used to take speakers as they present themselves. So if someone puts their name in, they want to speak, they're the next one to be called on, and the next and so forth. So there are mechanisms that are available, controls that are available that I think will, with proper training, with proper experience, will help people manage the concerns that have been raised. Not to say that those concerns are misconceived. They are reasonable concerns, but there are ways to deal with them. Thank you.
Paul.
Hi, thank you. And Miriam has her ceiling colored. And, Miriam,
My
go ahead.
invisible hand. I don't know how to change it. So thank you, Paul. This will just be, I just want to make sure, sorry, my dog is barking. I just want to make sure that the language, because the language as it is now, to me, isn't clear that we can make an exempt selves as the select board. So do we vote on our own exemption? I think we need to be very clear that we can exempt ourselves. And temporarily is fine too, because y'all know I'm not running. So really only needs to be for the next 8 or until May 7th. But I want us to be able to make that exemption. It's a pressing importance to me.
Are you saying a president should be able to pardon themselves?
So, are you all done there?
The legislature does that all the time. They exempt themselves from all the rules that the rest of us have to.
So the language says the select board has the ability to grant exemptions. So that's what the language says. But I wanted to just speak to two quick points. One, about this idea that Chaz raised, and I agree, we have to be careful about the signs and symbols and backgrounds. And in this culture today, sadly, everybody's offended by everything. And so we have to be really careful. Otherwise, we're all going to have these blurry backgrounds, and that's the only thing. I think that is something we have to be very careful of. And I wouldn't support too much of this, no signs or stuff. When I can remember before I even got involved in town meeting, I showed up at a number of select board meetings with signs. I think I might have had a hat on that associated me with a certain, group of people that were trying to deal with something. Bernard, you might have chased me out of the room if orange hats weren't allowed. So
No,
I think we really need to be careful with that. And I want to concur with Mike. I've participated early on in advisory meetings when they were in person before COVID, and they got unruly. You get a packed full of people passionate about an issue, and it takes a pretty heavy gavel to keep people like Warren under control. So, and frankly, there was at least one incident where there was a pretty bad, situation with some individuals that they felt they were discriminated against. They certainly were yelled at in public, and it was a very bad situation. And that was done in person. So I think we just need to be careful. But I do want to. Chaz did get me thinking that this is not flipping a switch. We just can't flip a switch and assume that 57 boards and commissions are suddenly going to be able to figure out how to use the open platform and be able to do it effectively. So, I do think we need to be thoughtful about how to roll this in effectively, so that we don't get to a point where we go, this is a disaster, we have to stop it. And I think that's going to take some thoughtful planning. I like the idea of a written policy that's read about public comments and, expectation setting, participating in the meeting format. And frankly, if you become unruly, you may be removed from the meeting. Just as the way if you are unruly and disruptive in a public meeting, you might be asked to stop or you would be guided out of the room. So I just want to say that we need to be thoughtful about the boards and commissions that we're going to ask to do this, and don't put them in a situation where they're going to fail because they're not prepared, they're not trained on how to do this.
Okay. How can we give staff who I've put the burden on to come up with a suggestion? How do we do this? I see Chaz has his hand up, and then Mike.
Yeah. So I guess my framing questions to you are: one, is this base language that Paul has proposed, the amendment to the amendment, what you want? And two, how do you want the rollout? How would you like the rollout of that structure, if so? Because I will tell you, to amplify Paul's point, this is going to require increased activity on the part of board and committee members. You board and committee members are going to have increased responsibilities here, and that's we will develop training, obviously, and make sure you're not set up to fail, but there's just going to be an increased amount of requirements on their part. So I think my questions to you are: is this with temporary exemptions maybe authorized by the select board only? Is that where you want to go? And then if so, do you have thoughts about how you would like it to be rolled out?
Well, and I raised a number of questions at the beginning, some of which were shot down, but not all. And I'd like to address, excuse me, address those. I mean, so in addition to Paul's amendment, let's see. I mean, the issue, do people want to just see a list of everyone in the meeting, or they want to see actual faces? And the question of body language was raised, but body language, for the most part, is primarily relevant with respect to the body language of the panel. In this case, in the case of this body, the select board itself, and anyone who's coming up, who's speaking on an issue. So I don't know what the answer is. What people want. Whether they want to see everyone on the screen, so everyone is just little postage size pictures, or they want to see a list. And secondly, the issue of exceptions is already there. And I assume we're viewing this as sort of a pilot program. That's the sense I got. And of course, we're also talking about the security procedures that must be followed, and that means identifying them and training people to use them. And I guess my idea of banning all signs or symbols has been shot down. Okay, so we'll have some pretty nasty background symbols, and we just got to get used to it. I'm used to it. I can take it. So, any thoughts on that? I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah,
your
Mike
hand
has
is
the
up.
Thanks, Bernard. So I did put my hand up. I'll pull it down now. So in answer to both your question and Chaz's, I think the sensible thing to do is to pull a small work group together. I'd be very happy to participate in that. In fact, I would be very anxious to participate in that. And I think it would be sensible to ask a couple of the people who drafted this, what Paul and I had to worked with, basically, their language to answer some of Bernard's questions about, what do town meeting members want to see? What do participants in government want to see? What does the public want to see? And it shouldn't take a huge group of people to begin to grapple with these issues. And so, apart from volunteering and suggesting that that's the approach that we should take, I think that's the upshot of this.
I think it's a good idea. And we can put 2 people from the select board on that working group without getting into deep trouble. Is that you volunteering, Paul?
I would be happy to, I would
Okay,
appreciate
so it's
participating in
gonna
that. If
be-
someone else doesn't feel like they really, Miriam, if you really wanted to do.
I mean, Miriam has some issues that need to be
I think
need
it's
to be
important
addressed.
what you
So
I trust that Paul and Mike will be able to address those.
yeah, okay. And I assume that select board members can, without violating the open meeting law, send their comments to maybe Devin or whoever is in her position to have those those concerns incorporated into the discussion or into the work group's work.
I did have one
I've
comment.
had my hand up, but I don't. think you're
John
saying-
had his hand up for a
Oh, you
while.
called on me, maybe because I was waving my hand frantically.
I don't mind if Paul finishes his thought before I speak. I just thought maybe I was invisible all of a sudden.
No, you're not, and you have the right colored hand, so it's prominent on your.
I know. I tried so hard.
I understand it. I just wanted to say that I do think it's going to be important for us to think about phasing this in with boards and commissions and prioritizing. Maybe there will be folks that we could, they'd be completely comfortable with a group training and they feel like they could run off, and others may feel like they need some more hand-holding. So I want to encourage us not to flip a switch and expect, on March 1st, everybody is using the open meeting platform and it's going swimmingly. So I think phasing is important.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely critical. John, sorry if I
Thank
missed
you.
you.
No, that's okay. What I wanted to say, because we were directly asked a question, I think we should, at our next meeting, vote for Paul's amendment. And if there are revisions to the amendment between now and then, we can consider it as revised. But I think we need to clearly state that this is our intent. And it's fine to have a working group, and it's fine to, and I think phasing it in is the right thing to do. But let's not create any doubt as to whether we think this is an important statement about transparency and an important statement about what constitutes a truly open and public meeting and what doesn't. And let's give the boards and commissions under this policy till the end of the year to, bring it into effect sooner rather than later, if possible. Let's offer them a few training sessions along the way for any that have doubts about how to do it. But let's not be tentative about this. I don't even think we need to call it a pilot because everything we do is a pilot. If it turns out that we made a bad decision and we have to backtrack on that decision, we can always backtrack on that decision. And we have done that many times in the past. I think it's much more to the point to say we've been challenged with a question, and as a result of the challenge that came our way, we have come to realize that there is an important change that needs to be made as to how we conduct meetings of public bodies in this town. And here's how we're going to do it going forward. So that would be my position on this.
Yeah, I would oppose that. I think, we're suggesting a working group, and, we can give it a short deadline, but I think that, even that issue of Paul's amendment should be thought about. Do we want to make it temporary? Do we want to make it, limited in some other way? So that's my thinking. Paul, you had your hand up?
I just want to, I know you and I are probably going to disagree on this, but I think that an implementation working group for a policy that the select board adopts next week is, could be very effective. And, I wouldn't want to drag this out for weeks. And I'm with John. I'd like to set the expectation that, we are, darn near close to the language for a policy amendment. And I think what Mike was offering is implementation working group, which I'm happy to participate in, but I don't want to navel gaze on the policy for the next few weeks, to think about this. That's just where I'm at. I'd be prepared to vote on a policy amendment for next week, either based on what Mike and I shared, frankly, or a tweaked version. I wouldn't want to drag it out any further.
No, it's not dragging it out. It's making sure that we've thought through, all of the issues that need to be thought through, even with respect to that one amendment. Now,
Yeah, and I think those are just implementation details, Bernard, from my viewpoint. But I may be thinking about it differently than you, and I respect what you're saying.
okay, someone posed the question.
I'm sorry.
Chaz, I'm sorry.
So it sounds to me like the sense of the board, if the board confirms this, is that you would like to move forward on altering this policy, and that you would also simultaneously set up a select board, working group on, implementation, where some of the nuance questions that you've talked about, like, cameras on, cameras off, a working policy on,
Deadlines.
Deadlines, model. Well, I think John's
Not deadlines. I said guidelines.
Guidelines, yeah. I think John's suggestion on, what we present to you is, by the end of this calendar year, all boards and committees will be, without an exemption, should be switched over, and that will give us time to run trainings. We can build a phase schedule out. Devin, I know, can, a final act. Sorry, Devin. But you can tell Chelsea this is what you did. It's just to build a kind of a tiered program where we just ensure that boards and committees are trained. And then I think it is, just important to flag, right, that we do have a robust history of how we conduct a business, and different boards conduct work in different ways. advisory, commenting, well, we do it a certain way. It's true. And advisory is not subject to this policy. Advisory is an independent body, the body of an independent legislature. What we haven't talked about in a long time is what do we want our meetings to look like, and how do we best effectuate them? Because right now what we run is what I would call a homebrewed version of Robert's Rules of Order. There are a lot of things that we don't do, and there are a lot of things that we do. And I think maybe one of the things this implementation group should think about is a question that a number of you have raised over discrete issues over the last couple of months, which is, do we want to have more detailed guidance on how to run meetings? Do we want to have, I think the movement of the body in general and of the town away from formality for formality's sake and towards a more constructive meeting process is really good government. But I think then, too, you need to kind of take the time to codify that. Because right now you do have a number of bodies that just behave organically in different ways. And there's no kind of North Star guiding principles to come back to. So to the extent that as part of this implementation, you might consider, the broader question of what is the Brookline way to run a meeting? And how do we write that down in a way that is helpful to people who might not know that? And provides meaningful guidance that we can then continue to fall back on, so that people don't put their hand up and say, I do it this way, and therefore you all should do it this way. You have a core document that says these are our guiding principles of how to run a meeting. So that would be kind of my thought.
So that means we say that this is how we run meetings, and you have to run it this way also.
I think that's
we have to be just a little careful. One of the problems with town meeting form of government, as well as one of its strengths, is that it's not so formalistic. People have an opportunity to sort of pop in and say their piece, even when it causes inefficiencies. And I'm not sure that it's a good idea to impose those types of rules on people. I'm sorry, Mike, you had your hand up.
I think Chaz, there's an interesting discussion, and it's an extension of what we were talking about in the first place. More broadly, to think about, well, how do we want meetings to run is a question, but I don't want to try and boil the ocean here. Let's deal with this particular question. What are we going to use for a platform, and to what extent do we want any flexibility built into those rules? And frankly, that alone will help enlighten us as to how we want meetings to be structured, because meetings are to some extent structured around the tools that you use. So let's get this done. And I don't know whether it can be done in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but it's not a long-term process, certainly. But let's get this done, and then perhaps it will create some more questions for us to think about along the lines of what we've just been discussing, the broader issue of how meetings work.
Okay. I guess for the first, okay, what's that mean, Miriam? Trying to read your body language, okay?
That means let's move on.
Let's move on. Okay, so the first question is, do we want to take up Paul's amendment next week?
I just want to clarify for the board that you are not doing regular business next week. Next week,
Oh,
we have
that's
a
right.
joint meeting with the advisory committee for a presentation on the financial plan.
Okay. Thank you, Devin. I had completely forgotten about that even though it was discussed. At any rate, okay, so that addresses my problem. It gives us a little extra time to think about this and not make a rash decision, or a quick good decision, whatever you want to however you want to characterize it. So I take it, do people want to put that on the agenda for 2 weeks from now? I assume everyone does. Okay, so Devin, or your successor, will do that. Now, how are we going to set up this working group that Mike suggested, which now has Mike and Paul on it, and whatever staff members can work with them. Just leave it to them to pull together and come up with a more detailed policy proposal?
Yeah, and they can invite various people to join them in this,
Yeah.
Figuring this out.
Yeah, let us come back with some recommendations on 2 weeks or, in time for the meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
On a framework for potential implementation and changes.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
Okay, if you can come up with something for the select board to look at and that can be posted in a public place so that we can make comments, I think that would be good. That would be good.
We'll endeavor to do that, Bernard. I
Okay,
think Mike and
good.
I can probably pull that off. May not be 100% complete, but we get us
That
done.
doesn't have to be, but something that we can chew on and come up with some ideas for. Okay, I think that ends this discussion. Next, we have, let's see, our policy on who is required to have, what is the policy, Devin? What are we talking
The
about?
policy
Okay.
involving the
Recording of
recording
public meetings.
public meetings, and I'd
Right.
like to just tee this up briefly. John, Select Board Member Van Scoyac brought this item up. I want to give you history here that you first put this policy in action in 2020, and then you revisited it in 2022, and now you are revisiting it in 2024. So I think that's actually a really nice schedule. And this is the policy that requires certain boards and commissions to record their meetings and then post them on the town's website.
Okay, and the issue before us now is, should we expand that, right? I mean, that's the only issue that right.
May I say a quick word about this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Even though a lot of boards and commissions were not on the list that we came up with a while back, they routinely conduct their meetings via Zoom. It is not a major extra step to require those boards and commissions to hit record and, while they're having a Zoom meeting. And once they have that video record of the meeting, it's not, I assume it's not a whole lot of extra work. Maybe someone wants to differ, to say to the public, the meetings that we have on Zoom are on video, and here's the list of the recent meetings that are on video, and here are the links for you to watch a meeting that you couldn't attend. There are at least 3 meetings happening right now, simultaneous with this meeting, that I wish I could be at, and I can watch them later and catch up on some of the important decisions made at those meetings via video recordings. It's being done, and I think we need to just sort of formalize that this is something that is not that difficult to do, and it's a huge step forward in transparency of government. Huge, to be able to go back to a meeting you couldn't attend and actually attend it virtually, via the video.
Right, good. Okay, so the issue is, who do we include on that list of committees that must record? Paul, I think you had your hand up before, Chaz.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. But I had a question, and Chaz may answer it. So there is a cost to recording. And I don't know if Zoom provides us with an unlimited forever storage capacity for Zoom meetings. So that's the first question I have. Is there a cost associated with these? And then the comment I'd like to make is one, I happen to agree 100% with John. It's invaluable to be able to go back, and I watch many meetings on recording because I can't attend them live. And it's helpful for me. And sometimes a select board member going live, I can't help myself but speak. And sometimes that could be a violation of open meeting law. But I do think it's helpful. But I want to point out that many of our meetings, our boards and commissions, I would like to see them record if we can afford it, but we're having difficulty getting them to even post their meeting minutes. So if you go to boards and commissions, there's some that they don't post their minutes, or they're, randomly posted. And if we wanted to really improve transparency, we ensure that every board and commission that is required to be posting meeting minutes actually post them in a timely fashion. And it's I know it's not being done on a regular basis. I would like to see the recordings, but we'd want to make sure that they actually post them along with the meeting minutes. So that's my thought.
Yeah. I mean, as a practical matter, we don't have people to take minutes at all these meetings, unless there's a staff person there. If someone has to volunteer among the committee, and that creates difficulties for volunteer organizations like ours.
Yeah, the recording may actually be a better way to do it then, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. Chaz and John.
So yeah, there's certain special requirements about minutes. Unfortunately, you can't just say here's the video. So in terms of practicalities here, you're right. There is a cost to storage for this on Zoom. We would, have trouble with capacity to store these on our servers. And I think they're just, the number, again, we're talking about 57 different boards and committees where it's a pretty daunting task for us to take on. I could see two potential solutions here. One would be that we offer this on request, that we do the recording and we offer any recording on request to whoever asks it, rather than trying to. And so that way, within a set number of days after the meeting ends. And so that way, if there is a specific meeting you're looking for, that then goes out. I think some committees already do this. For example, CTOS does it that way. And that way you're not creating a permanent drain on space, but you're just offering that on request for folks who want it. The other way we could potentially do it is we could inquire with the Brookline Interactive Group with Big, if they would consider posting Zoom meetings, files from Zoom on their government channel on YouTube. And so then they would be hosted there, as not as regular programming, but effectively as a repository for the activity of boards and commissions for whom you have that. You ask them to ensure that recordings are available. We'd have to talk to Big and see what their thoughts are on that. But it seems to me that that's a potential option. We would just need to make sure then that there would be a policy in place for boards and committees that run their own meetings to make sure they're recording, make sure that they press record at the beginning, stop recording at the end, download the thing from Zoom before it goes away, and get it to Big. So it's, to Paul's point, there are steps in the process that are already tough to follow for some, and we got to make sure that they're doing this too. So those are two potential solutions that don't burden our infrastructure in terms of storage and cost, that may work. Just wanted to put those out as potential options.
But does Big have unlimited storage capacity?
Pretty much. I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but YouTube owns a lot of server farms out there.
And it doesn't cost us anything. Mike?
You were going to call on me. What happened to me?
Oh,
Sorry.
Your yellow hand is up, not up.
No,
Okay.
it wasn't. You said I would be next, and then you
Oh,
forgot.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't push, but I'm responding to something that's already been said, so I wanted it to be fresh. I don't disagree with Chaz on this question of if it's recorded, does that mean we have to have this infinite storage capacity to archive stuff? I don't think it. I'm not imagining any kind of long-term archiving of any of this stuff. As long as it's recorded, that's the key first. I mean, all you got to do is hit record, and then made available for those who request it, and you can set a time limit on for how long it will be made available for those who couldn't get to the meeting, and then you don't have to archive it any longer after that. Furthermore, it's absolutely the case that we have and have had for a long time a dereliction of duty when it comes to keeping of minutes. There are boards and commissions right now who have barely any minutes posted, for a period as long as a year. And it's embarrassing, frankly, to have to ask them, can you please go back and post all of those minutes that you haven't been posting? It creates an awful lot of work, and yet we have a duty to the public to take minutes and to keep them posted. And I do not think it's a leap of the imagination to say that with recorded meetings available, there is also AI, and there will be, if there isn't already, the capability to use AI and audio and speech recognition technology to make acceptable versions of minutes of meetings, which of course have to be approved by the body in question. So it's not like we're going to be posting garbage. But it takes a lot of that sort of first step, and it takes advantage of the technology of AI to get past that first step and get a set of minutes that is based on, speech recognition and the ability of AI to recognize and condense and make intelligible material.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, there's a very cogent, very practical question has been asked in the Q&A by one of the people who's spent time listening to this. He's been recording his committee or his subcommittees for years. And he doesn't know where to send the recordings. And I think that we need, at the very least, to whatever policy we have here, we need to have a mechanism so that the volunteers who are at the front lines for these kinds of things know what to do with the material that they record.
I just want to jump in and say that in my conversations with Heather Hamilton, who is interim executive director for the Brookline Interactive Group, we are in the final stages of putting together an MOU, and she has repeatedly said that BIG would like more content for their civic channel, which is their government channel. And if we were to create like a central repository where boards and commissions could send their Zoom recording links, and we could then share that with the team over at BIG, that we would be happy to post those meetings. So I think that solution that Chaz raised could be a path forward here.
And in the meantime, is there a place where Mr. Trevette should send his stuff?
I think presumably, right, you would send it to the same person who's posting your meeting materials and your minutes, but I want to, make the board aware that staff, who are already struggling to make those regular postings, then to need to add the video component on top of that could be challenging. Not that saying that it's insurmountable, but that, another perhaps phased approach regarding that, especially to our town website, right? We'll need to keep them on there for a certain amount of time. We'll need to ask to delete with our records access officer. There are just a lot of steps that are involved once we create the record in that way and choose to post it on the website, which is why I think that the YouTube channel, which is managed by BIG, could be the solution that, means that we have more government content out there for residents to consume in a format that perhaps is even better than reading minutes. And also it takes, the burden off of staff from needing to post an additional, document, figure out how to download the Zoom. I think often, sometimes I've had board or commission members call me and be like, hey, I forgot to turn off like the recording, or we only started halfway through. Is there any way to recover? So this will again be another big training initiative.
So the answer is, let's wait until we have the MOU in place. And so he should hold on to his archive for the moment, and there will be a place to put it. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so in terms of this policy, someone, maybe, one person from the select board should look at it and see what, in addition to adding committees and boards and commissions to the list, we'll have to address in the future.
My hand keeps going down.
Paul?
Yeah, my hand was up and then it went down. And it's a floppy hand. I was curious about what is what are the requirements for us to store and retain public records? So a meeting recording essentially would be a public record if we recorded it and we had to hang on to it. Are we required? Is there a time frame for that, first of all?
Yes.
And two, does that mean, and would Big, if they agreed to store all our videos and not just the link, but the actual video storage, would that be forever, or at least in compliance with Mass General Law around records retention?
All right, I see Joe Callahan is, or his bear.
Oh, there he is.
Good evening, Joe Callahan, Town Council. So videos, well, the larger issue of how long we have to keep public records is defined by a document called the Municipal Records Retention Schedule. It's over 120 pages. It has lots of little columns and, I'm sorry, rows, and you have to figure out which type of document falls on which row. And of course, like with many things in the law, there's no good, clear answer. So videos of meetings would fall under at least two categories. Generally, you'd have to keep them for at least 6 months. Historically significant meetings, you'd have to keep permanently. So maybe town meeting. But also then you get into the issue of, I wouldn't want us to get rid of some videos so quickly if we have a land use dispute that's going on. Meetings of planning or ZBA, we might need select board meetings. We might need more than 6 months. And we could have a decision of the select board and we're sued 3 years later. I'd want that video if we were sued 3 years later. So there's no good answer on how long we have to keep them. It could be as little as 6 months. It could be a couple of years, or in some cases, it could be permanently.
That's helpful. And it would be, and Devin, maybe you're already having these conversations with Big, but what type of commitment are they making to us? Are they actually offering to store the video file or just the link to the video file? And if it is the video file or even the link, for how long do they have the capacity to do that for?
So the town will have the video file.
Oh, they will. Okay.
The town will have the video file in our Zoom cloud storage.
Okay. So we would store it and we give them the link.
And then that's how it would be accessible to the public. So that keeps that's how it would be accessible to the public. So it keeps our website clean and then negates the need for us to need to be like kind of pulling through that every few years.
But I assume that link could also be stored in our we have, I forget what's it called, what's the document repository where you can get you can find any document. What's the name of that system?
Yeah, the document center.
Yeah, the document center, that could also store the link, right? Or the particular board and commission and the date, if you wanted to search it that way, right?
It could, but again, I'm thinking of staff time and uploading this document, changing it, uploading it again, doing that every time there's a meeting recording. I think that would, negate the benefit of sending the videos to Big.
Yeah. Okay, John.
Yeah, one more comment, if I may. I just don't want people to discuss this as though, gosh, there's this complication and there's that complication, and it might not be possible. Other communities are doing this. They're doing it routinely. They have, a system set up whereby within a limited universe of the key boards and commissions, every single one of those boards and commissions posts, materials that go with the meeting, posts minutes, and posts video, all in the same platform. And it's immediate. Like the next day, whatever the body is that met the previous night, the video is up and it's in the same place as the agenda is. And then later when there's minutes, it's in the same place where the minutes are. It's doable. And I just don't want us to back away from it out of fear that, gosh, it's getting kind of complicated. It's doable.
Yeah, and I want to comment on that, John, because I I met today with the team from Civic Clerk, which is the agenda management software the town is going to be transitioning to over the course of the next 6 months. And this is the contract that you signed back in December. And honestly, one of the projects that I feel very proud of, because it's going to streamline the way we post all of our agenda meeting materials, minutes, packets, and streamline posting for staff. So I think it's going to be a better experience internally and externally. But what we've gained in that is civic media, which is, I think, one of the things that you're referring to that other communities use, where you can concurrently stream up to 3 meetings at a time on the town's website. And then that generates a recording that could then be stored with all of those documents. So we have an opportunity to pilot that in this transition. And I think that's definitely something, when I was thinking about even how we're going to transition our boards and commissions to this new way of posting agendas, I turned to this policy involving the recording of public meetings, because this document indicates to me as staff that these are boards and commissions that the select board has deemed, significant enough that they want these things available kind of at a moment's notice. So this is the kind of the first phase of boards and commissions that will be transitioning to this new way of posting agendas, minutes, and packets. So I think, John's point, having a conversation about those boards that you want to see, moving in this direction, and then amending this policy, kind of like you have now on an every 2-year schedule, makes a lot of sense.
Okay, how are we going forward with this? Okay.
I wanted to share my confusion about what we're doing, Bernard. Are we,
Okay.
so what's the ask here? Are we asking to approve the policy, commit to modifying the policy? I'm not sure.
Right. I think if you're thinking, this is John's item. I think John should explain better than I can.
Well, I'm happy to just provide an answer to how we move forward with this. I think that in the same way that we set up a working group on this whole business of how to do Zoom meetings, not a working group of the select board, but rather a request to staff, administrative staff. They know who they need to talk to see if we can take another step forward into the world of there being widespread, routine recordings made of meetings that are conducted via Zoom, and then making them available to the public, with the aim of let's pick the dozen particular boards and commissions that we think are of greatest public interest and urgency. In terms, I think we started with a group of 6. Let's make it an even. Let's make it 12. Let's a clear a dozen. But then also let's say to other boards and commissions that are not in that group of a dozen, that if they routinely conduct their meetings by Zoom, here's how to keep a recording of the meeting to the extent that we are capable of giving them the space, the website space and the other space to keep recordings of their meetings. If they want to do that for their own convenience and for the convenience of the public, we should also enable them to opt to do that.
Paul?
Yeah. So, okay. Thanks, John. That's really helpful. As I said earlier, I value the recordings of the boards and commissions and be able to, I do think it increases transparency and engagement with the public. I am going to throw up a cautionary flag about the ability of boards and commissions and frankly staff to absorb and effectively implement the amount of change that we just talked about this evening. So we first talked about, a working group and the implementation of a policy where we're going to change the format of how boards and commissions may be running their meetings. That's a huge change. And I don't want to minimize the potential for for that to impact boards and commissions, and what it will take for us to roll that out. This is not flipping a switch. If we then on top of that add, Zoom, how do you record, the provisions about recording, and then converting those and storing those and where they should be stored, that sounds like a lot of change to be happening to try to tackle at once. I'm wondering, John, if maybe we can do these sequentially and get through the implementation of the moving away from the webinar format to the meeting format broadly, and then come back and address what you're saying about video, and trying to get more boards and commissions onto video and making that rapidly accessible by the public. Just a question. I am worried about our ability to absorb all this change at once and what it's going to do to a staff that's going to quickly lose someone soon that's very good at helping us with this type of stuff.
Yeah. John?
Well, Chaz and Devin can certainly speak to that. I will say that Chaz, correct me if I'm wrong, that we are expecting to have it in place at some point in the not distant future, a administrator who is defined as being our head of communications, and that would be a top item on the to-do list for that director of communications. And I'm using that term, but it might not be the term that we end up with.
Chaz, would that be in their scope of work?
The community engagement specialist is dealing with a lot of these issues. How we engage with the community. I want to be, I want to be mindful of her time, because one of the big issues that I think you've identified on the board is, and I'm giving the game away, we have extended a conditional offer to a candidate, so I'm very excited about that. We hope to have a formal announcement shortly. We've been without a community engagement specialist for a long time, and moving this into the select board office is a real commitment to our reflective of our commitment to community outreach and efforts on that front. What I want for that person is to be able to step in and work at a strategic level. And I want to be careful about assigning them discrete projects like this at this juncture. Here's kind of my thought on this is maybe what we do here. Because I would also be loath to have, for us on staff to kind of pick winners and losers here. I think it's important for us to hear from the board on who the important, all of our boards and committees are important. And I mean that. I'm not being facetious, but to the extent that you think that there are important policy things that need to be archived and on video and shown that way, John, if you want to propose an expanded list,
sure.
And then we can take a look at that and say, okay, given that list, here are the best options. I think that's the best way to do it, is say,
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, if phase 2 is this, then we will come back to you with options on how to make that happen.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? There are no other items on our agenda, so far as I can tell, since we handled the noise bylaw waiver earlier.
I do want to note, you did offer on the agenda the opportunity for public comment on this issue. And then there's the additional public comment session at the end of the meeting.
I'm sorry. That's right. Okay. Devin, could you open up the public comment segment on this proposal?
Well, I did just promote Arthur Conquest, so
Okay.
I feel like perhaps we can take all public comment now on general and also the recorded meeting policy, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, that's okay with me.
Arthur, welcome back.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I fixed it finally. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to just do half of what I was originally going to speak about at the top of the meeting, okay? And I'll come back at a later date in February, to discuss the first part of what I was going to say. Okay, so Devin, you can begin now with it's only half, but half of 3 minutes, all right? So we won't have the same confusion. The celebration of the Juneteenth national holiday is only just around the corner. I've had discussions with the select board member, John Van Scoyac, and the director of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Committee, Lloyd Gelanu. I also sent out a survey last June seeking feedback from town meeting members about the two separate celebrations that took place. I prefer not to air our dirty laundry in public. To avoid it, I'm asking that an ad hoc committee be set up as soon as possible to discuss how things are going to shape out this June coming. I think, to be very frank, there's just too much confusion with the various groups, and it doesn't bode well for how we as a community, the Black community, function, okay, to help our cause. So I'm asking you as a committee or the board to put together an ad hoc committee so that we can get about the business. I know that Darnell mentioned this during his presentation, okay? Nothing more. I thank you for your time, okay?
Next person signed up for public comment is Adi. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you, Devin. Good evening, everyone. Adi Genesee, Brookline resident. Today, I just wanted to speak in regards to the Zoom policy, understanding everyone's concern. But I just wanted to state my concern as a resident, right? So there's a few things we have to know. Policy is not law. Policy is not backed by law. And I don't think breaking policies means you're breaking the law. So the reason I'm saying that is we all know where the Supreme Court stands in regards to people's free speech. And I do echo the town administrator's view that we have to be careful while making policies that we do not infringe on people's rights, right? There's a reason the First Amendment exists. So I see a lot of this concern more like a sensitivity issue. I mean, granted, some people come and Zoom bomb or whatever the case may be, but it's more about a sensitivity issue. So, for example, if a town resident who happen to be minority and Black tells some of you rich folks that you don't live where we at and where you live is different or whatever the case may be, that's not a threat. I think in context is saying you don't have a clear picture of low income issues. So I just want to ensure that there's a clear difference. The Supreme Court know what a threat is and what we perceive as threatening. So as much as we don't like it, it's the burden of being in public eye and being a leader and the decisions you guys have to make. And some of us won't like every decision and we have to disagree, but we can't start creating this new atmosphere in Brookline where everything is said is considered or can be a threat or whatnot. We have disagreement as a community, and we've seen that over time. A few bad apples doesn't spoil the tree. So I just wanted to mention that we should keep that in perspective, that policies are not law. So we should know, and we should caution on that side of things. Thank you.
At this time, there are 14 attendees. No one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment, although there are many comments in the Q&A.
Devin, there are a lot of comments in Q&A.
Those were happening in live time throughout the discussion, which is available at every select board meeting.
Yeah. How do we save those comments? I've never figured that out. Just cut and
I
paste?
can save them.
Okay, actually, I can cut and paste.
You can also do that.
Yeah, okay, I've done it.
She could save them and email them to you, Bernard.
I can do it to myself. Even email it to myself. Anyway, okay,
Can I just comment on Joe's picture?
yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes,
So
that should be banned from
it-
people's
it-
No, I
background.
love it. I think it's wonderful.
Be
Joe,
recommending.
See Joe's
yeah.
picture. What
Anyway,
is Joe's picture?
Is it an otter? Is it a Muppet lawyer?
The
It's
Muppet
the-
lawyer.
It's the Muppet lawyer, Joe from Legal.
Really.
It's fabulous. Thank you, Joe.
Hat tip to Chief Pastor, who taught me about that Muppet. My children are a little older, so I didn't know about this new Muppet. So.
Let's hope nobody's offended by the Muppet though, because.
I was gonna say, that's the kind of content you could possibly be barring if you choose to not let
I would
people have
absolutely-
photos. Why would
absolutely
you not want
recommend
to
you
see that?
bar Joe
I
from-
find Muppets very threatening.
Well, the right wing may see him as threatening also. I mean,
I was
Well,
gonna
you know,
say, I was gonna say,
Okay.
not for the first time, Miriam and I disagree strongly on an issue.
Oh, you like that? You don't like the Muppet? I love it.
Not a
I didn't
fan.
see the Muppet. Was it on the screen, Joe? I don't know.
Yeah,
it was-
Joe, sorry,
His,
Joe.
his
Joe,
avatar was a Muppet. There you go.
Nothing against
Okay.
nothing against the Muppet. I just don't want him attending select board meetings. That's all.
okay. On that note, let us end the meeting since there's no other items on our agenda. And we've covered everything, including end of meeting public comment.
I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Okay,
Hey.
enjoy
All
your
right, bon
budget
voyage.
abroad.
Have a safe trip.